Let's go to bang.
The premier debate league. Get one hell of a venue.
That are the reason we're here tonight.
Well, as Rose said, there are criminal penalties if they don't follow the law, and that's the recourse that we would follow. We undertook a very steep hill, a steep climb to get this done.
Word war debate, it's the best thing. Oh, what up, balls? Thanks for the sub, bro. Buenas noches, Piscositos. What up, what up, what up? ¿Qué tal? Quiet piggy. What a piece of shit. Quiet piggy. Oh my god. It's the bat. What up, Pepe? ¿Qué fue? Shut up, Biggie. Hope you guys are good. One sec. What up, everybody? Welcome to another day in this hellscape of ours. Doesn't it just grind your gears? I had to start late today. Sorry, folks. Sorry about that, Piggy. What a piece of shit. Shut up, Piggy. This guy's unhinged, isn't he? Got a lot of stuff to talk about. Got some. Oh God, Governor Newsom is getting into it. Let's see if we can show this to you guys. People are talking about this. People talking about everything that's happening. Life is good. That's good. Hey, as long as you think it's good, right? It's all subjective anyway. None of it really matters. Doesn't really matter in the end, huh? Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Quiet, piggy. Or did he say quiet or shut up, piggy? Quiet, piggy. That's an old timer from old Trumpy. He still got it. Have you seen the changing world order? No, I don't know what that is. Sorry. My Prada's at the cleaners, along with my hoodie and my fuck you flip flops. You pretentious douchebag. Spoken like a nihilist. It's Animal Farm. Did you guys like Squealer from Animal Farm? What's going on? Pisco all week long? Either way, that's the pot calling the kettle black. I love that. I love the energy. All that's left is Donald Trump to sign. Can you please sign this pig photo of you? Trump on his David Piggate Cameron arc. I don't quite get that. I know the Black Mirror episode. I think it's a pig in that episode. Is that the first ever Black Mirror episode that there ever was? And ever will be? Sir, with tears in my eyes. No, on the release of the files to sign. Oh, he signs all the files. Imagine if the law was like you have to send the files to every American with a social security number and a address. The logistics alone. The logistics alone. Pocket veto. Lol, 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 lol. Yeah, we're going to get into analyzing this law. Okay? And you guys are going to like the way the law looks on some things, but there are other parts of it which I don't know what to tell you folks. There's a lot of gray areas. A lot of things to get your ears perked up about. And we're going to do this little analysis because I know you guys ain't reading all that by yourselves. It's not that long. It's 3 or 4 pages. So we're not talking about a lot of reading, but I know you're not reading it by yourself. And I want you to watch the stream, and you got to get informed by the things I tell you. And you got to eat some of your vegetables. We can't just be watching the war-to-war debate thing all day, all right? We can't do that every day for 2 hours. I'm starting to think I don't think any of these congressmen actually thought any of this out. How's President Piggy going to get around releasing these files? He's not going to do shit. I didn't do shit. I didn't fucking do this. That's Trump right now. He's going to say in his chat, can't read. Not saying you can't read, that you won't read. None of you ever read. You never read the thing. Some of you think you read. But none of you actually do. Maybe 1 or 2 of you. Maybe the small minority. The small minority of my streamers read the thing. Many of you just skim it. That's right. Raise your hand if you're skimming. Yeah, I know it's some of you. Between you, Legal Eagle, and Bruce Rivers, the criminal lawyer, I'm illiterate, says Tomato Juice. Epic job of whipping votes against the bill, by the way. Yeah, this was very well done whipping of the DOJ. I love that the DOJ is whipping votes for the legislature. That's like awesome that we have the Department of Justice is literally politicized and engaged in the political process. By every definition of the word, they are politicized. Mr. El Taco Boy says, I can't read. Wouldn't it be hilarious if Trump loses the redistricting legal challenge and Dems win the gerrymander war? Josiah, I think that is a possible scenario. When you take a look at what's going on, I don't think it's guaranteed. You'd have to trust the Supreme Court. But I do think that is a possible scenario based on, we're going to take a look a little bit. Not going to force you to read the entire opinion, but like the shit they did in Texas was so stupid. It was so dumb and so easily avoidable, but they basically did like the one set of things that they're not supposed to do. And it might be fucked. Listen, the Supreme Court might bail them out. I'm not counting my chickens before they hatch. But there's some stupidity there, and I do want to walk you guys through that today as well. So you guys can always arm yourself with knowledge. So that when people try to bring up, but what about California? You know what to, because you've already seen it. You've seen it from the source. I'm your source. Okay? You all will pledge allegiance to the stream. Just kidding. Isn't it crazy that every streamer becomes an egomaniac? Would Gavin be in the wrong to not gerrymander if Texas stays struck down? Yes, he would be in the wrong. Yes, correct. He would be. SCOTUS might want the case to gut the Voting Rights Act even more. Here's the thing, though. It's possible. I didn't get to this part. It's possible. From what I've read, this might not even be limited to just the Voting Rights Act claim. This might be like a straight up, we'll talk about it, not based on Section 2 at all. So, obviously Section 2 is in there, the analysis is in there, but there are potentially alternative grounds to sustain, not just on Section 2. So, there's a potential, again, I don't know if the Texas, because I didn't get to that part where they're holding, in fact, I'll probably just jump to it in a second, if they held it on the alternative grounds, but there are alternative grounds that are non-Section 2 related. You huckleberry. Quick shout out, some housekeeping. I checked it. Let me just double check so people don't think that I'm just trying to beg for memberships on YouTube. I just want to make sure that you guys know that I'm not lying, so I'm going to read it from the source, because last time I said it was only one more membership before we got this emote for the YouTube people. Again, it's going to be static, but I just want to make sure, because I was wrong about that. Thank you so much, Josiah. Again, he's the cream of the crop. Nobody does it better. 2 more members needed. I'm reading it, quote, 2 more members needed, and we'll unlock a 16th emoji. Well, they call them emojis, not emotes. Weird. And that will be the liberal surrender hands emote static version. Until such time, you can create your own scuffed liberal surrender hands emote using the pendejo emote with 2 hand emojis. Just put that in between. And you got your little scuffed. Yep. Andy is showing it off. You can make the hands whatever color you want. Do some virtual blackface. Very cool. Josiah, why don't you hop on the stream one of these days? Thank you so much for the membership. I think now we'll be 1 away. We'll be 1 away. Now, if the number changes, you can't blame me legally. Who win a debate between these constitutional lawyers, Mike Johnson or Jamie Raskin? We have some words to say about Jamie Raskin, because Jamie Raskin did some cringe shit. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Thank you so much, Valerie. I think that's our thing. I think we'll get it now. Maybe I'll refresh this and see if it reflects the fact that your memberships, or if it's just yoinked $5 away from you, in which case you were warned. Buyer be warned. Wait. It now says 25 more for 17, but it's grayed out the add another emoji. What is it? Is there some cap? Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Oh, no. Wait a second, folks. We're fucked. Well, because I was very busy in the last few months, so not blaming you guys. Memberships went down. So this is what must be happening. When you reach that threshold, it's not like permanent, and you have to maybe maintain your emojis, like your members, to get more. Oh no. So I already have over 17, and so the additional members aren't hitting the threshold. Oh no. Well, maybe I can replace one of the ones we already have. I'll try to replace one of the ones we already have, but sorry about that. Okay, so that explains why. See, I wasn't lying before when it was 1 away. I'm sorry. Guys, I'll replace one of the less used emote, maybe the lawyer emote, because you guys don't use that one as much. I'll replace that alpaca one with the old alpaca ones. That they're not used as much as the Pepe's, as the Blue Maga ones, and as the Pendejo one. All right, so yeah, we'll do some moving around. for you guys. Appreciate the memberships, regardless. To Josiah's question here, Josiah, who we miss dearly on Live and Learn. There'll be a replacement Live and Learn on Thursday. I may be able to attend it, but I'll have to see if I can do it. But I think Aaron will be joining us on Thursday, but we'll see. But we miss, in any respect, we miss our good friend Josiah. We do miss him. But he had a question. Shit. Who would win in a debate between these constitutional lawyers? I think I would trust Jamie Raskin. Mike Johnson's a bit of a low IQ type of guy. Why alpacas? I'm Peruvian, so like it's kind of the theme of the whole thing, right? Because Pisco, Peruvian. I'm American, but Peruvian American, style, ethnicity, background, right? I am born in this country, but heritage, Peruvian heritage, I guess I would call it. Latinx, some might say. The Mandela effect. Guys, think right now. You know Fruit of the Loom? Fruit of the Loom? Don't look it up. When you see Fruit of the Loom, do you see a cornucopia? Just think about it. Not there. Never has been. Never has been, bro. How do you spell Fruit Loops? How do you spell them? Tell me how to spell Fruit Loops. You mad? But you didn't know that. You're wrong. But you didn't know that. Kind of crazy, huh? Crazy how that works. Crazy how that works, Andy. You were fooled, weren't you? You didn't know better. It's okay. Now you know. That's what I do. I debunk. It's AI. It's fruit. It's always been fruit. Yeah. You got. And I learned you. I'm here to get you out of the matrix. And you, I don't know what you're doing. You need a guy on the internet tell you basic truths have always been the case? I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't think that that's good for you. I think you need to take some time, consider what you think you know. What is, how do I get this thing? Because we're about to go off a little bit. We're about to go off a little bit on a little person. On a person who, in some respects, we're supposed to respect. But, in some sense, he said a thing that was a little bit silly. And it needs for us to call him out. Boom. And I'm going to show you this right now.
Let me just say a couple more things to you great Florida Democrats. One of them is we are a big tent. We must be a huge, vast tent. I say this is a party that's got room for Marjorie Taylor Greene if she wants to come over. We got room for any...
Huh? This is some, invite segregationist energy. That's a bit too much for me, bro. I don't really want that. Okay? This tent's gonna allow for anti-Semites and... This is kind of love Hutch. Hutch praxis in action. The thing is, she's a fascist MAGA person. Okay? Let's not whitewash Marjorie Taylor Greene. We don't need that, all right? We don't need that. I don't need that in my life. I don't need that in your life. Not in the slightest. Something's up with Raskin. Something going on. Josiah, let's talk to your man. I know you know this guy. Josiah seems to like talk to every Democrat. He's got connections. Hutch would say her vote is more valuable than her morals. Can't believe people are falling for the Marjorie Taylor Greene grift. People don't learn it. Yeah, you gotta learn when people tell you like these things about themselves, like that they believe in Jewish space lasers, that when they support insurrectionist president, when they basically transmit all his lies, and like one time they do something that's like we agree with. So now the tent is big enough to include like such people? No, it's not. We don't want them in our tent. I don't want them. I like Raskin. This was funny, but the premise is tactical. MAGA is welcome. I don't think we need to do this. Imagine be like, Donald Trump, come join the Democrats. That's like what I'm hearing. JD Vance, the tent is wide open for you. Osama bin Laden, we want you in our coalition. It's for votes. Uh-oh, Common Good. Are you standing MTG, Common Good? 25 minutes into the stream and you haven't reacted to World War again. Oh, Word War. All right, we can react to it again.
But there's no brand of act.
Just kidding. I do have it tucked away, though, just in case. There's no brand of excellence. This is where the best go to bang. It's going to be a banger. We have all different formats. It's going to be at Atlantic City. Let's see what other concepts that we can remember. Right on the water. It's right on the water. So you can have this fireplace in front of you and everything can be nice near the fireplace as a VIP and it won't be too expensive. And you get to meet people who have your worldview. It's never been done before. Huge names involved. There are big people involved. Big people. Raskin would be an awesome live and learn guest. Yeah. I'd rake him over the coals. Say, are you taking money from AIPAC? Just kidding. I don't know if he is or not. It's a joke, guys. But I do think that when we interface with politicians, like we were thinking maybe, like imagine that we were going to invite Tom Swazi or Glusenkamp Perez or one of these other people. I feel like we should ask some real questions too. I don't know how much I've like. It's cool to interface with politicians, but I don't think it should just be rah rah rah. At least I don't know. What do you think? It's a fine line. It's a fine line. Because on the one hand, we want to have the viewer understand like we're living in a particular moment in which solidarity is required. But do we just want to be basically, what's the word? Blowhorns? Is that a word? What's a blowhorn? Megaphones for what these politicians say? Not sure. I know that our role is to be like investigative journalists. Thank you so much. Raiders from IRI. Oh, I'm really important. Have you guys heard about World War debate? Thank you so much, IRI. IRI is our guy. He's this incredible streamer. and one of our illustrious hosts on Live and Learn. Oh, IRI, all the things I could say about you, none of them would truly reflect how deeply I appreciate your C-SPAN analysis, how much a congressional hearing procedure junkie is needed in the discourse. And so really appreciate the raid. Really appreciate all you guys. Guys, we're taking a look at some politics going on. In a second, we're going to do some legal analysis so you know what's happening with this Epstein files law, so you can actually learn a thing or two. It's not long. You just got to eat a little bit of your vegetables. And you can see when chicanery starts to be afoot, because there will be chicanery, mark my words. There'll be chicanery. It'll be happening. And you need to know the statute that was just passed near unanimously by the House of Representatives. One vote against it, Clay Higgins, and by unanimous consent in the Senate. So you got to know a little bit about the law, so when the shit starts happening, when they start hiding things, you're like, I remember that from Pisco's stream. Alternatively, we can just watch the word war debate trailer 5 more times and keep analyzing it. Or we can just go through Mandela effects. Fruit Loops just got a bunch of people. I can't believe how many people messed that up. One away from Magna Carta, as if I could ever make that mistake. Never. I just couldn't prove it. But thank you so much for the raid. Thank you, Raiders. Raiders, welcome in. Give the stream a like. Why don't you? It's free. It's completely free. Completely helpful. And when you do it, you're fighting Trump. And you're fighting the ghost of Epstein, which still haunts Trump and the Republican Party and potentially some Democrats as well. We can zoom in on the shirt stain and enhance. Yes, of course we can do that. So why don't I just get right to it? Let's go to the bill. This is a bill. Ever hear of it? I'm just a bill. This is the bill that passed. Okay? This is the law. This is a law. All right? And a law to become a law, a bill to become a law, can't talk, needs to be passed by both House of Congress and presented to the president. The same text, same exact text. And so this is the law that they've been trying to pass. We're going to take a look at it, and it's not very long, so don't go away anywhere. This is what you need to know going into this week and going into the continuation of the Epstein files saga. So first off, the title of this bill is a bill to require the Attorney General to release all documents and records in possession of the DOJ relating to Jeffrey Epstein and for other purposes. Okay? There's a statute passed by Congress that styles every law to begin with this phrase. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Alrighty. Remember, when you take a step back and look at this law, that we don't need this law. What does this law do, right? This law is requiring the Attorney General to release documents. But of course, the Attorney General can just do this. You can just do things. The Attorney General has it. So the presumption would be, well, if Trump wants to release this and actually agrees with it, he can just do that. But he hasn't been this entire time. He has been lobbying against doing that and against this law until Sunday. Now, if you listen to Ben Shapiro, we'll get into the Texas stuff in a second, Bizarre. Not in a second, probably in like 30 minutes. If you look at Ben Shapiro's recent video on Marjorie Taylor Greene where he's lying about a great many things, but including and especially the reason why Trump is coming after Marjorie Taylor Greene, he says, oh, she's wrong because look at this Truth Social post by Trump, where he says, release it. Why don't you? Fine, fine, fine. You might as well have said, fine, release it. Jeez. And Ben Shapiro's like, oh, wow. I guess Marjorie Taylor Greene is wrong. And the reason Trump's calling her Marjorie Trader Brown, another banger, unfortunately, is because she's trying to wrest control from the movement he created. Not me, though. I have no designs to influence where the direction of the Republican Party and MAGA movement goes. Me, Ben Shapiro, the guy who was against Trump for the longest time and certainly doesn't care about the soul of the MAGA movement, about a great many things. Yeah. A lot of my conversations and little isms are references. Okay. So back to the law. So that's section 1, the short title. Section 2, there's only 4 sections. Section 2 is like the operative obligation on the Department of Justice. Oh, wait, we're dropping some frames. We're good, right? Everyone good? You guys can all hear me, right? It's not long. You guys can hear me? Yes? I just need one person to confirm. Otherwise, I'll just... Good now? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure you're okay, guys, and you didn't lose me. All right, cool. So, not super long law. Section 2 is the operative part that imposes an obligation. I should mention that the law does not contain an explicit enforcement provision. I heard Thomas Massey, either on CNN or some other newscast, saying that there could be consequences for the DOJ if they don't follow the law. But if such consequences exist, they're not in this law. And oftentimes courts, especially this court, that is the Supreme Court, will be reluctant to impose some kind of enforcement mechanism when it's not explicit in a law. Sometimes they do it as implied, but sometimes they don't. It's unclear, A, if the law allows substantively for there to be lawsuits in the federal courts to enforce these provisions, because it doesn't include a private right of action or a public cause of action or anything like that in the law. And it's unclear who would have standing to sue. Standing is a constitutional requirement, Article 3 standing. The case or controversy requirement for the federal courts makes it necessary to have some kind of injury that's traceable and resolvable by the courts. That's a constitutional standard. Can't get around it. And in cases like this, the law sometimes makes a provision for who would be the injured party, perhaps the Congress in general. But usually in these kinds of laws, it's not clear that the public has a self-standing injury if this is not complied with. And any member of the public could sue. It's not immediately obvious, and that would be the result, or indeed that any member of Congress could sue. Perhaps it would just have to be the whole body of a branch of the government, perhaps Congress together. Unclear. All this is me saying we haven't resolved that. But certainly, if anyone tries to file a lawsuit against Pam Bondi or the Department of Justice, and notice also who's directed to do the stuff, it's the Attorney General, not the President. So this is directed at the Attorney General and the Justice Department, and only those places, not anywhere else in the government. So there's that. But beyond that, like, if someone sues the Attorney General, who could, right? Could it just be anyone who wants to see the documents? Usually the courts are hesitant to apply like just general standing to anyone who wants to bring a suit. If it's too broad, then the courts are reluctant to do that, especially absent some kind of clear textual commitment to have that be done. What if they declare bird law as the new law of the land? I guess we're all fucked. Up to the birds. Release of documents relating to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, this I think is important because this might inform like how we would read the responsiveness provisions here for what needs to be released, which are incredibly broad. So I'm about to just show you the responsiveness provisions, and they're very, 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 very broad. In fact, I almost think interpreting this as written is almost preposterous. And so if I were a court, I would be thinking about ways in which to narrow the scope of what's being requested here, because it's pretty insane. Let me show you. Not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of this act. Also notice this, 30 days, not a lot of time, as you'll see. The Attorney General shall, subject to subsection sub B, make publicly available in a searchable, publicly available, not just to Congress. So this isn't just going over to the committees, which they often do, and let them take a look at it before they like sort of parse it out. You guys know that sometimes that happens. They'll ask for documents in the context of like an inquiry or some kind of committee, and they'll request it, right? And then that committee will like parse it out however they want. This obligation is for the general public, so it's not just to Congress. So, subject to the restrictions, make publicly available in a searchable and downloadable format all unclassified records. Notice that proviso as well, that requirement. So this obligation only pertains to unclassified records, not to classified records. So if something is classified, it's not contained within the obligation here to provide to the public. All right. So all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials. This is very broad. The types of things, basically all stuff, everything you have in the possession of the Department of Justice, including FBI and U.S. attorneys' offices. This is like the main, right? Like the main police of the DOJ and the line prosecutors in particular cases. So this is just included. So basically just the DOJ. So already you can start to see some loopholes, right? Potential play on the joints that we can think about. Firstly, like every other power that Trump claims to have, he always tries to stretch it to the absolute maximum, even to the point of absurdity, where it's like, can I declare an emergency over like the lack of cornflakes? Or can I declare an invasion if it's just like one guy, like, right? So there's a lot of discretion the president has in different areas. They're either implicit in the structure of the Constitution or as determined by the Supreme Court or by the law, which like literally gives him certain discretion, and whatever he has, he's going to try to push. The court, that is the Supreme Court, in different cases has, without explicitly holding this as much, but strongly suggested, especially in this case called Egan, that the classification authority is kind of an inherent executive power. And the operative classification authorities in general relate to presidential determinations and are defined by executive order. Now, there are congressional statutes that will take from the executive order either language or will be determined as relates to those determinations by the executive, that is the president. Example, that is the Espionage Act, where national defense information is not solely according to the classification rules, but it's heavily influenced as applied by what the president has actually classified, determining like sort of connected to the executive orders. And then you have some statutes that explicitly refer to classified information, and that classification comes from the president. So that's one big area of question, which is, can Trump just declare anything he wants classified? Now, you might think that like there's also potentially some constitutional interest that would prevent certain things from being classified. Like imagine that Trump tried to say, I am classifying the fact that the sun is whatever miles away from the earth. Like, can Trump classify things that are public knowledge? Could he classify and say any reference to my MRI is classified information? Unclear the extent to which there are limits, if any, on classification discretion or classifying things retroactively. Not really spelled out in tons of case law. Suggested that it's a strong amount of deference to the president, or whatever that is. That's an area of potential chicanery, of shenanigans. And shenanigans, as you know, beget shenanigans. That's one area. The other is who this is directed at, the DOJ. You can imagine there are things later on in this law that could conceivably address these two things. But you can imagine a president who has had access to this particular law for months now, right? Look at when this was proposed, July 15th. Let's transfer all of our documents from the DOJ to some other agency. Let's transfer them to Health and Human Services. Let's transfer it to DHS to conduct their investigation. So now the law doesn't apply. I don't think they did this because I think it's a lot of work and it would have leaked. But just to think about the literal requirements of this law, like imagine Trump tomorrow says, I changed the name of the DOJ to the Department of American Justice or something. I don't think he's going to do that, all right? I don't think he's going to do that. But just think about where there might be some play on the joints. Okay? And so let's see. All of these documents, all these categories of things, again, quite broad, that relate to Jeffrey Epstein, including all investigations, prosecutions, or custodial matters. So Jeffrey Epstein, full stop, right? So any unclassified records, documents, communications, investigative materials that relate to Epstein. So if there's some communication about Epstein meeting with like anybody, right? Like that the DOJ has like an informant that says that Epstein was attending some gala, and like things that are even like not pertinent to Epstein's like potential crimes or allegations. You know? So this is at its broadest a very potentially vast set of documents, communications, records, etc. Not just things that are pertinent to criminal investigations or the nature of the most scandalous accusations as to Epstein. It's everything related to Epstein, okay? Including all investigations, prosecutions, or custodial matters. So if it's, potentially related to some other matter, it's potentially a lot of stuff, right? DOJ is one of the largest intelligence and law enforcement agencies in the history of the planet. They got a lot of stuff. That's why this 30 days thing starts to be like, wow, you only get 30 days to do an insanely broad document review. Good luck to all the DOJ. Hey, we got any DOJ lawyers in the chat? Hey, DOJ guys, have fun with this. Now, my guess is they've already been reviewing a lot of this stuff anyway. But if it's going to be even broader than what they've done, whatever sweeps they've done, have fun doing your doc review. We'll all be waving and sitting with our popcorn here while you do the doc review. And it's going to get worse for the DOJ in terms of the headache this will cause. So next we have Ghislaine Maxwell. So another full stop related to Epstein. Related to another person. Ghislaine Maxwell. Anything, right? Involving Maxwell. Related to, right? Relates in its loosest possible way. It relates to Ghislaine. Anything that relates to flight logs or travel records, including but not limited to manifest itineraries, pilot records, and customs or immigration documents for any aircraft, vessel, or vehicle owned, operated, or used by Epstein or any related entity. Any related entity to Epstein. Like Epstein had bank accounts in different places. Epstein had, so like any travel record, itinerary. Does this include, by the way, like from private airlines or commercial airlines, things like that, So this is, I'm guessing, more limited than the other two big categories, and they'd probably be contained, right? This is like, a lot of this might be a subset of things related to Epstein. This is already very, very, very broad. This next one, these next two are, if you read them literally, I think pretty crazy. Pretty crazy to think. individuals, including government officials, named or referenced in connection with Epstein's criminal activities, civil settlements, immunity or plea agreements, or investigatory proceedings. So any information, right, any documents related to any individual named in Epstein's criminal activities or civil settlements or immunity or plea agreements, does this include the judges who are signing off on some of these settlements? Does this include, like, anyone who's a witness? They get all the stuff over it? Right? Like, Bill Clinton is named, right? In some of this stuff. Are you going to force the government to release everything related to Bill Clinton? Not just related to Bill Clinton with a nexus to Epstein. Everything related to Clinton. Think about all the things that the DOJ could have related to Clinton. Bill Clinton. Does that extend as far as Hillary Clinton? If Hillary Clinton was named at all in any of these things? Right? In connection with Epstein's criminal activities, civil settlements, immunity or plea agreements, or investigatory proceedings. So suppose that, like, Bill Clinton is named somewhere in a civil settlement. Or there's someone who came up with an accusation regarding Bill Clinton related to Epstein that they later find out was false or something. Or he's named in an investigatory process. That's why I'm like, wow. And then entities, corporate, nonprofit, academic, like, the dude had ties to, like, Goldman Sachs, to certain universities. So any entity with known or alleged ties to Epstein's trafficking or financial networks, even alleged ties, and you release everything about that entity. So that's why I think, like, if this is interpreted at its maximal, this is a humongous project and could be disclosing all sorts of crazy shit that has nothing to do with any of this. Which is, you know, as a judge, I might be like, maybe it needs to all relate to Epstein. But to be fair, that's not what the law literally is saying. The law literally is saying something seemingly broader. And again, I'm not saying that's how it's going to be interpreted, but you can start to see the potential issues and why this 30 days thing is like, whoa. Think about all the, like, even just to do a doc review of all the classified materials related to Bill Clinton. To check everything. And then you're going to see what's going to need to happen. Any immunity deals, non-prosecution agreements, plea agreements, or sealed settlements involving Epstein or associates, that's, like, trivially involved, and that's almost certainly encompassed under sub 1, right? This 6, 7, internal DOJ comms. This is the shit, y'all. This is the spicy, spicy meatball. Internal DOJ comms. Hey, should we charge Epstein for this? Hey, let's bring up a case on Epstein. Whose idea was it to talk about Epstein? Who was the person who decided, like, are there internal communications between different FBI agents? Hey, this is bullshit. I can't believe we're not going after Epstein. Hey, Trump is asking us to look at all these documents and to check his name for him. This is the spicy, spicy meatball. Internal DOJ comms. Emails. Make publicly available. Damn. That could be very embarrassing, and you can start to see the kind of And now look at 8. All comms, memoranda, directives, logs, or metadata concerning the destruction, deletion, alteration, misplacement, or concealment of documents, recordings, or electronic data related to Epstein, his associates, his detention and death, or any investigative file. So specifically, this request, this law, is calling out and saying, and anything that would explain why we don't have certain things or why things were concealed or misplaced or altered or deleted, we get all that stuff too, both with respect to Epstein in general, any of his associates, his detention and death, or any investigative files. So by its terms, the law's making reference to the potential of data loss and saying anything related to that, we want that too. 9, documentation of Epstein's detention or death, including incident reports, witness interviews, medical examiner files, autopsy reports, written records detailing the circumstances and cause of death. So very broad, very, very broad, in my opinion. This is not a trivial review. This is a demanding ask. Sub B, a prohibited ground for withholding. No record shall be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. So they're really trying to spell out you cannot withhold things because of these reasons of embarrassment, even if it relates to foreigners. So keep that in mind. Now, this is the devil in the details part, the permitted withholdings. It says the Attorney General may withhold, permissive, or redact the segregable portions of records that, so you can withhold or redact certain things. A, that contain personally identifiable information of victims or victims' personal and medical files and similar files, the disclosure of which would constitute a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. So a pretty, again, kind of general carve out here, but it has to relate specifically to victims. Now, could Trump say, hey, I'm a victim, so redact and withhold all the stuff related to me as a victim? I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm just saying think about it. Think about the ways in which these exceptions might be utilized by bad faith actors who are already claiming broad and elaborate powers under questionably deferential statutes or provisions. B, any depict or contain CSAM as defined under federal law. So you're not going to get access to the actual CSAM. This is another big carve out. And this is what I predicted. I predicted it may be first. If not first, I was one of the first who said this. Would jeopardize an active federal investigation or ongoing prosecution, provided that such withholding is narrowly tailored and temporary. So this would delay, but not fully prevent the release of, related to ongoing investigations. Now, here's the problem. In June or July of this year, Bondi, the DOJ, and FBI said, no more investigations, it's all done, case closed. And not until it was starting to become clear that Trump was going to lose this fight on the discharge petition and the subsequent law, did they say, I am ordering you to investigate these people related to this thing. Now we have an investigation ongoing. So that's the kind of another gray zone where, could he make that argument? I think he could. He will. And when it comes to the actual legal determination as a matter of like whether or not we can have Congress second guess an active federal investigation, ongoing prosecution, I think Trump's argument is non-trivial, by which I mean it's a legit argument based on Trump versus United States. Trump versus United States related to criminal immunity for former presidents. So it's not controlling on this case, but as part of the, I would say, framework of that opinion, it recognized that certain exercises of authority are beyond the scope of the other branches to police. And that one such authority was directly the power to initiate investigations and communications between the president and the DOJ regarding such things, such matters. That's a core and exclusive power of the president. And so my point has been, if that is a core and exclusive power of the president, that can't be questioned by other branches so far as to criminalize the president's involvement there, why can Congress not second guess that decision when it comes to keeping people criminally accountable, but they can when respect to document production? If we are meant to believe the court is being sincere, as opposed to simply giving Trump a break on his criminal case in D.C., if we take Roberts at his word, which I don't think you should, I think Roberts is not convincing at all in Trump. I think it's a dumb, immoral, unbounded, unconnected to law, fact, or the history and tradition of this country, that opinion is dog shit. But if you take him at his word, why exactly would Congress be able to force productions that interfere potentially with an ongoing investigation by the president when, again, you can't inquire, this is Roberts specifically, as to the motivation for why a power is invoked? You can't look as to whether or not the investigation is a sham investigation. Guys, why was Trump, one of the theories that Trump was being charged under in the DC case, what was that theory? Well, he ordered sham DOJ investigations into election fraud. That was one of the theories that was supporting the conspiracy. And what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said, core and exclusive. You cannot criminalize all the sham investigations, sham letters that Trump was trying to push and throw out to try to steal the election, because that's a core exclusive power. So now the core and unreviewable power of the president with respect to investigations saved him from criminal liability there from a separation of powers perspective. Again, a bullshit opinion, but that was the opinion. Why then? Could we look into the fact that these are obvious sham investigations after the DOJ admitted that there was no basis to investigate anyone? At least that was their position in July. Why can Congress interfere via document production? That would seem to unduly chill the president's use of his core and exclusive powers. You start to see why it's not good to do vandalism on your own Constitution, Supreme Court. When you start to do things that don't make any fucking sense, you're starting to see that when you just think about, oh, let's protect Trump. It feels weird for us to, indict during an election, so we'll just make something up. Has consequences that you don't realize in the moment. That's John Roberts. And that's the third exception. Fourth, depicts or contain images of death, physical abuse, or injury of any person. So you're not going to see the actual, not that there is actual footage, allegedly, of Epstein's death, but you're also not going to see his body, if they have pictures of that. E, contain information specifically authorized under criteria established by an executive order to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy, and are in fact properly classified pursuant to such executive order. Now, this is a little odd, and I don't know if I agree with this, whoever wrote this, because sub 1 already makes a carve-out that says this only applies to unclassified records. And so in one of the exceptions for withholding, specifically says they need to be classified. But things that are classified are already not covered under the obligation in Section 2. So this, I don't know if this is a drafting error or what this is, but I think there could be like a non-trivial argument that, hey, there's no grounds to even have an obligation related to classified information in the first place. And so anything that would be classified already isn't going to be handed over. That, I think, that's a weird one for me. I don't know what that is. But I think the intent of this is to say, hey, if there's a classified thing for these reasons, this is something that we'll respect or something. We'll respect classification with respect to these reasons. But they actually had to have been properly classified under the executive orders then existing. They're saying it is classified correctly as described in the first part of E. Contain information specifically authorized under criteria established by an executive order to be kept secret in the interest of national security and are in fact properly classified pursuant to such executive order. The thing is, if it's classified, right, then under subsection 2, the first part of it, why would it even be something that there would be an obligation to disclose in the first place for which a withholding exception is required? You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying, right? So if there is no obligation requirement with respect to classified information, right? It doesn't say all records, it's all unclassified records. Why would there need to be a withholding exception for something that isn't obligated to be turned over? You understand what I'm saying? Who understands? I'll move on if one person understands. Now, how I would read it is probably like, okay, maybe that's a little goof, but the purpose here generally seems to be to make a distinction between classified records in terms of what is legit and what's not legit based on things like that will show up later in the statute. We'll see. But I think this is confusing. Great job, drafters. Isn't it just being used like the word categorized? I don't even understand if you're following what I'm saying, right? Kokorono, follow what I'm saying, please. So, Section 2 gives an obligation to the Attorney General and the DOJ to make publicly available certain things. Those things are all unclassified records. Now, those obligations related to unclassified records, there are withholding exceptions, all right? But presumably it doesn't make sense to have a withholding exception that's not covered under Section 2, right? Why would you have a withholding exception for something that's not covered as an obligation? And one of the withholding exceptions refers to classified materials. Classified materials don't seem to have an obligation under Section 2. So why would you need, this seems redundant because you're never going to get this stuff because you're never going to have to give it over. That I think is weird. And I don't know how to explain it. And also this is weird. All redactions must be accompanied by a written justification published in the Federal Register and submitted to Congress. All redactions. But look at the withholding, right? Withholding says withhold or redact. So there are withholdings and redactions. Also, little c says permitted withholdings, not permitted withholdings and redactions. So it's weird. This says withholdings. Sub 1 says withholdings or redactions. But the written justification only seems to apply to redactions. And then this one, sub 3, says redacted or withheld. So redactions need to be accompanied by written justification, but not withholdings? You understand? You see that? Redactions must be accompanied by written justification, and the Federal Register is public and submitted to Congress. But like then they'll just withhold everything, right? And then will they need to provide a written justification? Then it says, to the extent that any covered information would otherwise be redacted or withheld as classified information under this section, the Attorney General shall declassify that classified information to the maximum extent possible. Okay. But here's a problem. Is classified information by definition uncovered, right? Is classified information uncovered because the obligation in Section 2 says only unclassified information? So how could covered information include classified? And then to the maximum extent possible, the Attorney General shall declassify. All right, cool. Thanks, bro. Thanks for that one. That runs into a constitutional issue as well, which is can Congress force a principle of the president to declassify things outside of what the president wants? How can Congress, and this runs right into Trump versus the United States, and this might create bad precedent even more that we fucking did it like this. How can Congress supersede the president's classification prerogatives? Can they? So this subsection big 3 here says, that you need to declassify as much as you can. Okay, according to who? Sub A, if the Attorney General makes a determination that covered information may not be declassified, made available in a manner that protects national security of the United States, including methods or sources related to national security, the Attorney General shall release an unclassified summary for each of the redacted or withheld classified information. Now, this is like concerning for me, right? Because this summary stuff only pertains to classified information, and it's for redacted or withheld classified information. Okay, you following me? So the summary thing is, all right, any kind of, this is assuming that we interpret this law to consider covered information as including classified information, even though the law specifically defining the covered information says unclassified, right? So assuming that we're able to get over that particular error, you might say, okay, cool, but for everything, they're going to make like a little bit of a classification log or a priv log equivalent, right? Where they're going to put a summary for each of the redacted or withheld classified information. Okay, cool. So maybe I can roll with that. Here's the problem, though. There's a big another hole. The summaries are only for the redacted or withheld classified information withholdings, not for everything else. And so the redactions must be accompanied by a written justification published in the Federal Register and submitted to Congress. That applies to redactions, not necessarily to completely withheld documents that would jeopardize an active federal investigation, to the extent that they're not redactions and just full-on withholds. If you interpret this, the omission of withholding here as being relevant, which I don't know. It says redacted or withheld, all redactions, but it doesn't say withheld there. And so this summary thing seemingly was intended only to apply to classified withholdings, but not for other types of withholdings that aren't related to classified. And so my question is, does this mean that if you withhold stuff, right, just withhold, not redact, things related to an active federal investigation, that you remember, the president and DOJ are going to determine that, do you both not need to publish a written justification in the Federal Register and submit it to Congress because they're withholdings, not redactions, and because they're not classified, but they relate to an ongoing prosecution, do you not need to provide an unclassified summary to Congress about the withholding related to ongoing investigation? Like, as I read those in conjunction, it's like the fact that you're omitting the justification in Big 2 and omitting the active investigation and other relevant withholding exceptions in Big A means like there's a bunch of different vague shit about whether or not we need to even provide an explanation for certain like types of withholdings or redactions. Do you understand? Right? That these aren't like, the way this is written seems to be arbitrarily specific to redactions here, such that we can carve out certain things where you not only don't get with like the actual documents that can be held, you also don't get an explanation. Where I think the intent of this law was to like either get the document or an explanation. But it seems like there's a way you can slice it where you can avoid having to get both the document and an explanation, just based on how it's written. And then obviously all the different areas where there are potential constitutional issues, like admonishing the AG to declassify stuff, even the fact that you're able to do this at all with respect to ongoing investigations, and then all the different like discretion places where the courts aren't given the discretion. And, presumably the Attorney General, it's in their discretion whether or not you can declassify it, and it's in the discretion about whether or not it's related to ongoing investigation, and it's in their discretion about whether or not it would be a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. All decisions to classify any covered information after July 1st, 2025 shall be published in the Federal Register and submitted to Congress, including the date of classification, the identity of the classifying authority, and an unclassified summary of the justification. This, I think, is good. But is it constitutional? Can you force the government to publish publicly, as relates to a certain subset of thing, all this information about classification? I don't know. Report to Congress. This is going to be fun for all the other lawyers in the DOJ. Within 15 days of completion of the release required under Section 2, the Attorney General shall submit to the House and Senate committees on the judiciary a report of all categories of records released and withheld. This I like. But it says all categories of records released and withheld. It doesn't say all records released and withheld. All categories of records released and withheld. And then a summary of redactions, including legal basis. Not a summary of withholdings. Just of the redactions. And a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in the release materials with no redactions permitted under subsection B1. So now you get your Jeffrey Epstein list of politically exposed persons. What the fuck does that mean? And government officials named or referenced in the release materials? So any government official gets on the Epstein list? I see. This is a fucking mess. That said, it's funny to vote on it still. And I think I would have voted yes. But I have questions about the drafting here. And just like arbitrary, let's make a list. Let's define a list. Because right, this is, and understand why this is a little sneaky. And frankly, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. No one's been able to define the Epstein list. So release the Epstein list. And I think some of the promoters of this law, perhaps including Ro Khanna and Massey, are conscious of the fact that it's very unlikely that there's an all-encompassing list somewhere. And so rather than deal with the possibility that they get criticized for not releasing the list, to me it kind of looks like they're defining what the list is. But of course, they're defining it in such a way that like isn't what's on the minds and hearts of all the Epstein conspiracy believers. So it seems a little like, dude, you know what all the people are actually asking for. What they're actually asking for is the goods. I've said this before. The goods. They want a list of people that they can sort of satisfy their feelings of critical pedo theory and the various different conspiracies that have formed. They want, in other words, people in handcuffs and a list of bad people. But this isn't that necessarily. I would almost say, sorry, this almost necessarily isn't that. This list, right, is not a client list. It is a list of all government officials and politically exposed persons named or referenced in any of these materials. So presumably, like, depending on your definition of politically exposed persons, right? Like, what's the Trump administration DOJ going to say? They're going to make a list that says Bill Clinton, all the Democrats, and that doesn't include Donald Trump. And so you're tasking the Trump DOJ to make a list that isn't a client list that they get to draft. What the fuck? This is stupid. That said, I'd still vote for it because I think it's funny. But also for transparency, whatever, like at least it's an attempt. But Trump has plenty of cards to play in this game. The real reason why you should vote for this law isn't because it's drafted well, because I think it's not. Isn't because you know it's going to bring down Trump, because it almost certainly will not. The real reason is because it exposes and hurts a feeling and confidence in Trump related to his lies. That's why you should vote for it. And because I guess transparency or whatever. But like, here's the thing. You're going to get a bunch of stuff if this law is followed. And I think that there should be like a report if we had like a trustworthy government that's like independently going through everything, like an IG report or a special counsel. That's what I would have wanted. The problem, though, is no one trusts the federal government right now. No one trusts the executive branch under Trump. Not even MAGA people on this issue. But there's no way around it, really. Trump is going to be involved in anything resembling a release of information because Trump is, of course, in charge of the place where the files are at. So he's not really getting away from that. So this is just to pressure the release of some stuff, something, somewhere. But there's going to be additional fights about what was released, was it everything? It's almost guaranteed. And it's not even necessarily guaranteed by the way this law is written. It's guaranteed by the nature of who is preventing the release of the documents, namely Trump. So this could have been the most perfectly written law, the most model of clarity, which I don't think this law was. And I think that that's a reason to be like, to groan and roll your eyes and be like, this is dumb. Why didn't you write it better? But it doesn't really matter because Trump is going to do some shenanigans anyway, in my opinion. That's the law, folks. Notice the absence of any enforcement provision, any right of action, cause of action, giving the right to sue to any particular person, to victims or something. Nothing like that there. So, yeah, I don't know who would have standing to sue. I don't know if it would be statutorily available to sue under this law. That is a notable omission. Any kind of criminal penalty for failing to comply with this law? Not sure where that is. Thomas Massey mentioned something about that, but really not sure. What's your overall read on the Senate voting unanimously? Was Trump heading off a true split with his party? Did they get assurances that the damage will be limited in your take? I mean, I think it shows. I think Johnson wanted the Senate to slow it down a little bit. I think Trump did too. I think the Senate just wanted to get this off their plate and pass the buck. And Trump doesn't really have, as has been exposed by this whole thing, much leverage to complain about it. He's boxed himself into a corner. By coming out and saying, I support the bill, why would he be like, everyone in the House should vote for it, but not the Senate? And so probably the Senate Republicans, they don't want to be caught holding the hot potato. They now have the perfect excuse to just immediately do unanimous consent without worrying about it and avoid any blame on them, on any particular person, just pass it by unanimous consent. And Trump doesn't really have a basis to pressure anyone on it because he already said to vote for it. And so it'd be weird to be like, what the hell? The Senate is fucking... Now, he might privately hold those things. But I think that there's a sense that he's weak on this issue and he doesn't really have the potential to push those Republicans around who are trying to get this passed. And if he starts picking fights with John Thune, like, he knows that he can't do that. He doesn't want to give more people, I think, excuses to break from him. And that's why I think he's trying to own the vote. So now what's left is to see how he deals with the provisions of the law and his obligations here. And if there is a way to, I don't know, get this into a court, we'll see what his arguments are then. I imagine somewhere, somehow, there will be litigation over this law. I don't know. Something just tells me that someone's going to be suing. Just maybe a thought. Okay, any questions? Any questions? Are you enlightened? Did you like looking at this law? Did this give you joy? Did this bring you peace of mind that we're going to get things? Are you winning? Does this still compel them to release files if they find new ones many months later? If they find new ones? Yeah, not clear. Not clear where the obligation ends. It's not bound by time. These are all things I would have hoped to make explicit in the law. These are basically some some basic questions I would have wanted someone to think about, maybe just a little bit. I think the biggest thing I've learned tonight is that Fruit Loops and not Fruit Loops. This law got me libbed up so hard. Can they sue anonymously? I don't know who can sue. It seems it's unclear who can sue here, or if anyone can sue. I doubt it will look good for Trump to fight the bill in court. Just makes the hiding, just makes it look like hiding more stuff, I guess. But it's like, I think he'll still argue it in court, and he can just say it's just the DOJ. It's easier to blame Bondi if it's in court, and the court takes a little bit and whatever. You think this could actually backfire for Democrats? I don't really think there's much exposure here for Democrats. So I support people passing the law. I just wish it was ran a little better. But like I said, I ultimately don't think it'll matter that much. Maybe omitting a cause of action here is annoying. And also, frankly, it might produce bad law if it actually does get to the Supreme Court, where we get even more unitary executive. Congress can never ask the president for any documents. The problem is, it would be weird to think that the Congress could ask for documents in the context of impeachment, but not through legislation. Like, okay, you can start an impeachment inquiry with one house and get a subpoena from one house under prior precedent, but you can't both houses of Congress signed by the president get those documents. This is the kind of hoops you have to jump through to make sense of Roberts' incoherent judicial philosophy. That all sounds well and good, but you can't ground or know any of that without the Orthodox Christian God. Do you think that there was any threat of the vote being veto-proof? Otherwise, I really don't see why even as dumb an administration as this one so transparently flipped their stance. I think they didn't want to be seen as opposing a vote that was going to succeed in a Republican-controlled House. Whether that's ultimately the right move, I'm not sure. Because he made the Senate... He basically gave permission for it to pass unanimously, which gives a lot more argument for everyone to just get it quickly through the Senate and just get it on his desk right away. And then any talking point, anytime he resists because he hasn't whipped any votes in the House and because it passed so amazingly, it hurts him on anything where he contradicts the law, especially because he was advocating in favor of it. So what's left to him, he took that decision, right, to have it appear that but the thing is, it didn't really convince anybody who wasn't already a Trump cultist. It's not really convincing people that he actually wanted it out there. So I don't know, it's kind of a limited benefit here. And more to the point, I think it undermines him if he were to ever resist a particular document coming out, given the overwhelming nature of the vote. And it kind of undermines him potentially in court as well. Thank you so much for the follow. If he were to argue that it's unconstitutional overall, right? Wait, you told them to pass an unconstitutional law? I'm not so sure that is legally relevant that he did it, but I think it would be impeachable, I think, to knowingly sign what you think is an unconstitutional law. And I'm sure that would headline the brief. Trump advocating passing a law that he now claims is unconstitutional. So it's kind of a bad look if he does that. Aruba. No summary for those who may have been tardy. Couldn't be me. All right. Long story short, the law has some holes in it, some numerous holes. They try to plug those holes, I think, unsuccessfully. There's some, I think, inconsistencies in how the law is written. Ultimately, I don't think it matters that much because he was going to do shenanigans no matter what. I think most notable is the fact that it doesn't include a right of enforcement for anybody. I think it's probably a mistake, but you should still pass it. What, the president isn't allowed to change his mind? Yeah, I know, right? Okay, why don't we break this up and I don't want to jump right into the Texas thing. I do want to talk about it though, because it's kind of funny. But maybe we'll check in on our good friend Tom and Rob, and see where they're at, just for a little bit, and then we'll get into the Texas gerrymander, because that's funny. Because I don't know if it's likely. I'm not gonna say it's likely, not with this court. I think on all things gerrymandering, you should expect to prepare for the worst from this court. But I think it's possible that the Texas maps don't hold and the California ones do, given what I saw. This was passed today. That's right, Allie, for both houses of Congress. Yeah, let's take a little check in for our good friend Tom. So at the start of this debate, Tom kind of conceded a little bit, and now they're just talking about whatever. So we'll just watch this for a little bit while we whet our appetite for the gerrymandering stuff. So let's just take a little bit of a palate cleanser.
Our courts would expect him to remedy that scenario.
Accountable, but they can't force the president of the United States to engage in diplomacy.
How can they hold him accountable? He has immunity. There's no accountability.
What does any of this have to do with shit? Anyways, this
You just said-
Agreed, Rob. What does this have to do? So the prompt was, which side is more violent, the left or the right? And they're like out in the weeds on like what Trump is allowed to do. I think they could have gotten a more interesting prompt, maybe.
and they can hold him accountable.
They
You
can
know
hold
they
him
cannot.
accountable for potential crimes. You said he committed a crime. The immunity decision does not mean that the president has full and total immunity. It means that they have immunity for official acts that they take in the scope of the presidency.
Deportations would be
Okay,
under the
so
scope.
under your
Okay, that's good, Tom. Hey, Tom, good. Deportation would be a official power. Good.
interpretation, Biden would have immunity there, but they could force him, despite the fact he has immunity, to bring Donald Trump back.
They would force him to request him
How?
back.
He has immunity. He'd say, fuck.
So that, I think, is a good question for John Roberts. Strictly speaking, the opinion, right, is for immunity. Now, one thing you could say is, right, criminal actions against a president who used their power, that is very chilling of the president's core executive powers, don't you know? But the prospect of an injunction to follow the law, that is not chilling. That happens as a matter of course. And so we think that we don't need to apply the same thing for court injunctions to just follow the law when compared to criminal immunity, which is very chilling. You see the problems in Trump of the United States? It's a very purposivist approach. What's too chilling? What's not chilling? When you base your opinion on a prior of what is the proper amount of chill that should be applied to executive action, even though you claim you're not doing that, you are having a normative stance on what the president ought do and how much he ought be or should not be incentivized one way or the other. So I can imagine the court drawing the line and saying, hey, this isn't unduly chilling like criminal liability could be, because we're just ordering the president to do something. And that is not chilling him, because he'll just follow the law. He'll know that he can take a certain action, and the worst that'll happen is a court will say to undo it, and then he can. But a criminal action, he'll never take the action in the first place. Well, who's to say which one is due and which one is undue? I think that the criminal law actually oftentimes duly chills the president. Right? I wish this president were more chilled by the fear of future prosecution. Doesn't seem like he's very chilled at all. And I don't know. I feel like shit's never been worse. And even Roberts, with his little, I don't know, nebulous statements that he puts out there every now and then when he deigns to comment on the state of the rule of law in the country, no, please don't say these things.
Fuck you. Now what?
Well, correct, but that is the point. That is the point. And if
Okay.
he did that, we wouldn't trust Joe Biden anymore, and we wouldn't trust him to engage in
The courts-
deportations
if the courts-
anymore.
If they can't even charge him with a crime, where's your fucking evidence that they can force him to do something
They
diplomatic?
can't force him to do anything.
Right. That's my point.
No,
They
it's
can't
not.
force
Your
Trump.
point.
They can't force him to do anything. Tom, bro, I know that you meant something different here, but you're giving him wins by just like saying what his point is. I know you probably meant that phrase differently than what Rob is, but Rob is just going to take that victory and run with it and say that you legally agree with him.
You lied and said that they actually did something totally different.
Then I want you to elaborate on that. Bruce B619, Tom get absolutely wrecked in this thing. Thank you so much for the super chat. Cap me at $10. Tom, what's it like Julia Romantis? She's currently cheating. What's her plan? Well, that's very rude.
Why do you read these? Gibbs, bro, fix your audio. Stop checking your tweets. You should be fixing the audio first and foremost. That should be number one. We've added a Red Bull to the mix as though we don't have enough beverages in the room.
But thank you for the money. And then Joseph Newton, good job putting the base together. Grid. Rob is going to destroy Tom. Props Tom for doing the live there without all the bears on both sides. We have no debate. Yeah, I agree with that. It's a hostile crowd to Rob. Good job for doing it. I do have a question though. You just stated. Okay, all these things are all stated. You know what? Just never mind. Just go ahead and continue.
Great show here, Admiral. Love it. I think he also confused Rob and Tom there.
What does this have to do with anything?
I just-
All of this
Because
is a red
you
herring.
lied
All of
and
this is
said
it's
that
not.
that what all they were telling them to do was they said that he had to bring it back and they're not allowed to make that request, and that is a lie because they said that that all he had to do was just request him back. That was
They didn't say that, Tom. They said facilitate his return. They never directed him to ask the Salvadorian government. That never happened. Bro, you got to get this. You got to come prepared, bro. You got to come prepared. That was very much a live issue.
Show me in the Constitution where it says a district court can force the president of the United States to engage in diplomacy.
when you say
Show me. I love this. This is a good tactic by Rob. I think it's slimy as fuck. It's this assumption that in order for somebody to be able to do something, it has to be explicit in the Constitution or somewhere. Or like the only thing that would show X is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. So, for example, he'll say something like, show me another time before Joe Biden did that a vice president requested a foreign president to fire a prosecutor by withholding loan guarantees. Show me when that's ever happened. And if you can't provide that evidence, then it's corrupt. If you can't provide that specific thing. So the way he frames it is only the thing that he's asking for would demonstrate the claim that he's looking for. So like in order for the district court to have the authority to order the president to do some kind of thing, it would need to be explicit there. Like where is it in the Constitution explicitly say that a court can order the president to do anything? Right? Where does it say that in the Constitution that a court can order the president to stop doing his student loan forgiveness plan? Imagine if that were the standard, right? Like, show me in the Constitution where it says that the court can tell Joe Biden that he can't do the student loan plan. Show me where it says that. Like, I want to get invited to this word war debate shit. We talked a lot of shit about it because it was funny to poke fun. And I might reach out to Rob because, fuck, I'd love to be in a prelim. I'd love to be engaged in this stuff. You know, I love these debates, whatever. He's not that good of a debater. This is a smart tactic, I think, to frame the evidence that way. But, like, it's very easy to cut apart if you just think about it for 2 seconds. And you shouldn't fall for that if you're, and I don't know if Tom ultimately will. For weaker debaters, I think it can trip them up. But just step back and be like, why would I need to show that the Constitution explicitly provides for this in order to show that the court is within its authority? You're saying that if there is no explicit message that, or part of the Constitution that said the court is allowed to, and then if he says, yes, that's the only thing I'll accept. Well, if that's the case, then do you agree whatever presidential action is not explicitly there? Therefore, like, it doesn't say that he's allowed to use the military to do da-da-da-da. And you trip him up that way.
force. What do you mean by that? Like,
Your argument is that the court said, Donald Trump, you must request him come back, correct?
yes,
That's wrong. It never said that.
Where does the court have that authority?
that the courts are there to uphold the law and make decisions on whether or not something was legal or not.
Do you acknowledge that they, in your words,
The problem is Tom is wrong that the court ever ordered that. And even though Rob's sort of contention that he would need to see an explicit provision in the Constitution for it to be acceptable under the law is wrong, and he then goes on to the Supreme Court opinion, like, where did the court say this or that? We're not able to get there because Tom is going to be miffing on the actual decision.
gave the president some immunity?
Whiffing.
Yes.
So you think that he has immunity?
Yes.
But they can force him to take diplomatic
Again,
action?
you say force. I don't think they can force him, but I think when they're
That's
telling...
it. That's your-
Okay, so you agree with Rob, Tom? You don't think they can force him? So what are you saying, Tom?
No, that's not the argument, because
That
that is my point, is that he is being told this is illegal and refusing to remedy it. That is my point, and you are
doesn't
conceding.
matter.
Yes, it does.
It
Your
doesn't
whole
matter.
Oh, so then there's an equivocation on, like, can they order him to do that? Can they force him to do it? And Tom is saying they can't actually force him, but he's saying they can legally. This is why we need to focus on what words mean sometimes, because, like, they're just talking past each other. Because Tom is using they can do something in the legal sense, or they can't do something in the actual sense. And Rob is just equivocating. It's actually Rob who's equivocating.
point is that that is not true, and you're lying, and you have just proven my point
That's not-
that I
the-
know you know you're
The
lying
whole
about
point
that.
was this. The whole point was this. They sent him there. They said, look, we don't have to ask them for him back. We don't have to do it. We can do whatever we want diplomatically. Your argument was the court said he had to request. I said they don't have the right to tell him that.
Whether they do or not was never decided.
You might not like his decision, but that's what happened. The guy came back because of violence from people on the left like you that are tough guys that say,
Then you attack Tom, right? The guy came back because of violence. So Trump acquiesced to leftist violence. You agree he did that?
use my Second Amendment by so plain clothes people.
So you got to attack him there, Tom. Got to attack.
And so these violence and the fact that our media covers for this shit, which became a political winner, meant that this fucking piece of shit came back into the country. And then once he was promptly told that he should be deported again, the activist courts over and over and over did everything they could to keep this alleged human trafficker back in the country. Because the truth is, that's what you people want. Then you post hoc justify the violence that we see in the left by being like, but this was so fucking heinous. Let's forget about Garcia for a minute, and let's forget about your Superman scenario where you're going to swoop in to save people from plainclothes officers. That's not the majority of the violence that's occurring against ICE officers right now. And so what's the relevance to that?
Before you respond, Tom, I'm going to respond to everything you just said. However, I feel like we've gotten a little bit far off topic. I would like to come back to the leftist versus right-leaning political violence, which more specific, unless you tie it. But
Rob just did that, Gibbs. Gibbs, the point... Rob just tried to get him back on track, and he's like, before you answer what Rob is saying, getting you back on track, I would want you to get back on track.
I'm going to respond to everything you just said, and then if you tie it back into the original topic a little bit more, I would appreciate it. Go ahead, Tom.
What was your last question again?
The idea of the two scenarios you've outlined, well, they're upset about Garcia and Trump didn't request, and that we're supermen that are stopping plainclothes people. That's not the majority of the violence we see against ICE.
Yeah, so I think it is. Again, if they do not
Most of the violence against ICE is based on Garcia. How would you prove that claim, Tom?
trust ICE to
I mean, I'm sure it's like informed by a lot of the feelings are informed by this or that, but like, how could you say,
actually carry out lawful deportations, it makes sense that they would eventually stand up to ICE and try to stop them. But
it makes sense that, and again, once more, unfortunately, it just sounds like he is justifying violence that might occur against ICE, and taken to its logical conclusion, it sounds like these, what are these guys? I always forget their name. Sovereign citizens. Well, if they were just lawfully arresting me instead of apprehending me while I'm traveling in my, not a car, it's my conveyance. The question is, who determines when, and when can you use violence? Just because you subjectively think the law doesn't allow for some other deportation that happened months ago, thousands of miles away?
When you say things like they're rioting all over the place, the left isn't being held accountable, and the right is being held to a much higher standard, seems to be the exact opposite, especially when we consider the BLM rioters versus the January 6th rioters. The BLM people on average had much more time in prison just off convictions alone. They didn't have some president swoop in and give
That's
them
laughably untrue.
Yeah, no, it is.
You ready for?
Okay, maybe they did need Gibbs to admonish them a little bit, because he's now talking about whether Trump did the pardons correctly or incorrectly. Now, I actually think that's an interesting angle to take, Tom, with respect to like violence, in terms of to counteract his whole notion of like, well, the left-wing influencers, they're covering up and justifying all the violence. And you go, well, the right is literally pardoning violent criminals.
That word that scares left per capita.
I'm saying per person.
Per capita.
Yeah.
How many people on the left rioted during BLM versus January 6th?
Go ahead and finish out, and then I'll let you. Go ahead, Tom.
More people.
More people in BLM, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so your argument is there was more total time served because
Average per person.
Average per person is absolutely untrue.
100%.
Absolutely untrue.
Again,
in fact,
every
the
study on this says the opposite.
I would like to hear one. In fact, the overwhelming majority of people that engaged in acts of violence in Black Lives Matter were never even charged.
And again, this is even before Donald Trump comes in and just lets all of them out, which didn't happen for the BLM rioters.
That's because almost no one was arrested.
That's not true. Over 10,000
okay,
people.
May 30th, 2020. Right?
Oh no!
I
hope he's ready for this one. Come on, Tom. You
Molotov
saw me talk about this one. Whoa! Wait! Rob, I debunked that. You admitted I debunked that. Oh, this is what happens. This is what happens. You got to be careful. You got to be careful. I'll debunk something from Robert, and then Robert will say, "Okay, fine. It wasn't. I don't have any proof for Molotov cocktails," and then he'll just repeat it anyway in like the next time he brings it up. You sneaky motherfucker. But Tom, you must have seen me debunk this talking point numerous times.
How many people arrested?
I don't know how many.
I think one.
I don't think it was one.
Yes, I think it was one.
I think it was one on federal charges from what I remember.
Okay, how many arrested then?
I don't remember.
So if you go back and you realize that the number's under 5, will you say, well, that's fucked up?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, well, I'm telling you it was under that.
Okay.
This is the way it occurred over and over again. In fact, many times, for example, we had those 2 lawyers, where was it, in New York? 2 people that passed the bar that used Molotov cocktails against a police car. They ended up getting like a year. Whereas if some January 6er would have threw a fucking penny at an officer there, they'd have
given him too much space, Tom.
Pardoned them.
There are people who had like 10-year sentences. There's people with 5-year sentences. But again, most of the people at January 6th, even the ones who went inside, had I think an average of 3 months in total.
You mean the nonviolent people?
Yeah, even nonviolent.
So you're comparing nonviolent to the violent ones that got arrested in BLM.
They don't care if they're violent.
You don't care if they're violent? Oh no, Tom. The proposition is about violence. Tom. You should just be like, hey, I think breaking and entering is violent no matter what. If someone broke into your home, would you say it's violent? So don't concede that any of these motherfuckers are nonviolent. We had to cash out what we mean by violent here. But then also, the proposition is about whether it's violent, so you should care about it. Bruh.
Yeah.
So I apologize. Yeah, so sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I don't care if
sorry,
they're violent.
One more time. We got a super chat just that.
Hope
Good job.
Tuesday was
By the
better.
way, chat, y'all are doing a really good job when I'm interrupting. There's time in your chat. Keep it up. We need the money. Money now, money please. We don't have any APAC backers over here, so I need the money. And by I mean Red needs the money.
Why is everyone shitting on
Spend a lot of money
IPAC?
and he did it for you, the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for reading the super chat. Gibbs, please don't read this unless the convenient time possible for all. Well, that's
Does anyone understand what this motherfucker is saying?
because I wish I had read that. So well, thank you so much, Pentuple, and suck a dick. How's that? Anyway, continue.
Yeah,
Good
if I'm
one.
part of a mob that is helping overwhelm the Capitol Police to make it easier for a bunch of people to charge into the Capitol, and some of those people do have treasonous and insurrectionist expectations once they get in there, if I am part of helping that, especially when everybody's chanting things like hang Mike Pence or stop the steal, then yes, I am part of this action, and they should have had years.
So
not
then
3
everyone,
months.
so everyone that was there May 30th should have got years in prison.
100%.
Okay, but they
Don't say that. What the fuck? Wait, please don't concede that, Tom. Not everyone who's outside in public areas near the White House where crimes happen deserve to be put in prison. What the fuck? And when you say that, you don't come off as fair. Rob's not gonna be like, okay, at least you're fair. No, he's gonna say, well, they weren't, and so there's a 2-tiered system of justice, and you're admitting that the left is getting punished less. Don't concede things just willy-nilly because you think that they're going to be like good concessions to appeal to the fair. You should be asking the questions of Rob, but definitely don't say, well, being in the vicinity of a crime makes you a criminal. That don't make any kind of sense at all.
Everyone that's ever been at a riot that talked about killing Donald Trump should have got years in prison.
Oh,
Possibly,
no.
but why
Possibly?
is it that Trump's federal
Wait!
government?
These are massive, insane nuclear bullets. Can we just... Can we just pour some out for the insane amount of bullets that Tom was biting every second? I've never seen a man bite so many incredibly... On this episode, people don't know things talking. Yeah. In a second, we'll move on to the gerrymandering thing because that's pretty funny too. It's a pretty good stuff. Yes, everyone who's around anybody who's talking about Trump dying should be arrested and put in jail for years. Hey Tom, you better be careful about who you hang out with, dude. Get it together. Soypill needs to get this talk from you. He concedes way too much. Yeah, I agree with that as well. Can't be conceding things for no reason, especially like it's. Look at what Rob asked and how like this is it's an insane question. You should give it pause. Like
talked about killing Donald got years in prison
Of this action,
Okay.
and
So
they
listen to the
should have had
questions.
years,
so
not
then
3
everyone
months.
so everyone that was there May 30th should have got years in prison.
100%.
Okay.
All right, that by the way, that by itself is crazy. Just being in the vicinity where crimes occur, where you have a legal right to be in that vicinity, you should get years in prison. And even by the way, if you don't, if all you're doing is X, Y, or Z, you should get years in prison. That I think is an absurd take. But now listen to this question.
But they did. And everyone that's ever been at a riot that talked about killing Donald Trump should have got years in prison.
So if you're in a riot or near a riot where people are talking about killing Donald Trump, you should get years in prison.
Possibly, but why is it that Trump's
Possibly.
federal government didn't arrest any of those people? Why would that happen?
I mean, this is a decent question to ask to undermine the notion this was like a very serious threat to the president. And this is one of the places where there is actually a productive line of questions. But you need to get on the offensive before you concede the whole ball game, because you basically just said, I mean, it's a good question, but I think it's a little late.
Well, I find this question interesting because they're cowards, I'll say, because they're worried of the bad optics of it, and because in many of these institutions,
So Trump was a coward, just like he was a coward by listening to the lefties who did violent things in bringing Kilmar back by your own lights, right, Rob? That's where you should jump in, Tom. Be like, you just said Trump is a coward, right? And you also said he was a coward because, according to you, what you said, he gave in to leftist violence. Is that right? So is that encouraging leftist violence? So Trump is encouraging. So take the initiative, bro. Gotta take the initiative. We've been on defense this whole time.
like the FBI, they were clearly against Trump the entire time he was there, because your party's lead at the time, Chuck Schumer, in 2016 admitted that because Donald Trump didn't particularly like.
And so now he's like, go back to this fucking quote. He milks this Chuck Schumer quote. He milks this Chuck Schumer quote in every conversation. They have, so Chuck Schumer says it, and so it becomes reality. So just because Chuck Schumer says it, does that mean it's real? You should be able to handle this. Don't let him just monologue his same own shtick.
Like the FBI, that they would have 6 ways from Sunday at stopping him, which they did the entire time, including illegally spying on him with vice warrants. So yes, because the FBI under Donald Trump that he was supposed to be in charge of was actually fucking.
And don't grant that. So you agree they didn't spy on him with a FISA warrant, correct? Right? Did they spy on him with a FISA warrant? Yes or no? Oh, but they got one of his campaign aides. Did they execute the warrant while he was with the campaign, associated with the campaign? No. So they didn't go after him while he was associated with the campaign. You agree he was a minor figure and the Trump team distanced themselves from it and said they was never part of it, even though he was. They lied. So there are ways you should not let that stand still. I think that you should, even if you're just doing a throat clear there, don't give ground. But here's the issue, right? And here's the truth of it. That's the truth of it. But that's not going to sell, Donald. Well, that's the truth of it. I got 3 rules. Here's the awful truth of it. The awful truth of it is conversations with people who allege these conspiracies, you actually need to have a lot of domain relevant knowledge. In order, and I said this before in my recap of the Tim Pool discussion, because Tim Pool brought this up, and I was prepared for it. If you want to see how you combat that, go to my exchange with Tim Pool on the May 30th thing he brings up. Because I know about this talking point. And I looked up the Parks Department report on it and Trump's statements related to it. And see how I jujitsu that, right? Actually, I might even fucking show you guys my explanation of it. You know? Why not let old me do the work? I think it's relevant to what we're saying right now. So just give me a second, guys. I think I said this exact thing. Sometimes I. Uh-oh. No, that's not it. Sometimes I. Uh-oh. Who made this Latin music, huh? How do I say this? There was also, I think, a huge advantage, and I'm just going to be honest. Insurrection debate. Here we go. Of substance from the debate, the stuff about the insurrection. So let's talk about that. I knew that Tim Pool had called it an insurrection, and I thought that it's possible. Okay, I guess we can watch this just for a second. Just for a second. It's me talking about it. That it's possible that he'll bring up May 28th, 29th situation. There you go. I'll talk about one missed opportunity that I had there, which I think would have been incredible. I think it's implicit, but it's not explicit. So here's the implicit point. You cared so much about May 28th, 29th, whatever, White House stuff, and you haven't even read the only government report that came out about it. You haven't even read it. Didn't even know it existed. Same thing, by the way, with Rob. Rob didn't know it existed. I looked it up. I found it, right? So these people don't care to even read the official accounting for these cases that are so important to them. Now, the way that I was implicit was when I kept asking, did you read the Parks Department report? Did you read the report? Did you read the report? So, but I wish I brought that home with saying, like, Tim Pool says he cares about this. He says there should have been commissions on it. Hasn't even done the work to read the less than 30-page report, or I think it was something like that, from the Parks Department on it. Didn't even know it existed. And then, so then that's one aspect to it. That's one thing where I wish I'd made it more explicit. I kind of let him move me around in different places to seem reasonable. So when he asked me like questions that weren't completely on point, my goal was to take the question and then bring it back. Take the question, then bring it back. Sometimes we didn't bring it back because I found other areas of interest for me, but I didn't want to be like, hey, there were sometimes where I said, answer my question first. I think there were 1 or 2 times, but in general, I was willing to go with the flow. But here was an example where if he had brought up the May 28th, 29th thing, I wanted to bring up insurrection Jan 6 because I knew he had called it an insurrection. Before I did that, there's the tension with Donald Trump too, because I know he's probably loath to publicly criticize Donald Trump. And so it's not just me playing off Tim Pool with the logic. I also want to play Tim Pool off of Donald Trump. That's why I'm constantly phrasing it in terms of, would you condemn Trump if he did this? If he did this, would you condemn him? Would you criticize Trump if he did da-da-da? Even my phrasing of that is putting him in conflict with Trump and making him look like a Trump dick sucker, which is what he looked like that whole debate. So it's very intentional in the sense that I want to put him in contradiction, in dispute, in an uncomfortable position vis-a-vis Trump. I don't want to just untailor it to any person. And so when he says, there should have been commissions on it, May 28th, 29th, why didn't it happen? Why wasn't there investigations? What do? I say, number one, Trump didn't say it was a big deal. He said it was no big deal. Did he lie? So now Tim has to spend a moment and be like, no, he didn't lie. I can't call him a liar. Oh, so he was wrong about whether his life was in danger, so he's deluded. And Tim says, yes, Trump is deluded about his safety. So he has to come up with a story. He's like Johnny Bravo. He's like so brave and his ego is so big that he can ignore clear and present dangers to his own health and security. Why did Trump say it was no big deal then?
What, May 29th?
Yeah, why did he say no big deal?
He's got an ego problem.
Okay, so he lied. Did Trump lie, yes or no?
No.
Well, you just said it was a big deal.
You're asking me if Trump's opinion is a correct statement?
Was it correct? Is he lying about his actual opinion? Does Trump think it was a big deal?
I think Trump thinks it's not a big deal.
Okay, so
like I said, Republicans don't enforce it.
Is Trump wrong about whether it was a big deal or not?
100%.
Okay, so was his life in danger?
Absolutely it was.
Okay.
That's why they brought him into a bunker.
So he's deluded for thinking that it wasn't in danger.
Absolutely. The dude has got an ego problem.
That's one area where I'm already picking off. Great, you call Trump delusional? That's my job done. The next one is, why wasn't there a commission or report? Well, who's in charge of the government, dude? You had Republicans by that time in the Senate, and you had they had time to make a Hunter Biden commission in the Senate pre-election. Why didn't they open up hearings for May 28th, 29th? And then Trump himself. You're mad there weren't more arrests? That there wasn't a special counsel? Why didn't Trump do something about it? And so he says, yeah, it's Trump's fault. Great. Concession, moved on. Now we're on to insurrection. So I said, you called him, watch what it did. I brought up the fact that he called it an insurrection. He brought up May 28th, 29th, but I call it the fact that he's called these things insurrections. Because I know that he did. And so now I am hoping to press him to get him to call Jan 6 an insurrection or to look absurd in denying it. So this entire time, right, something that he's brought up, right? He's brought up May 28th, 29th to show the lack of consistency of Democrats in the left. And I have judo made it into Tim Pool's consistency, framing Trump as a bad guy. Trump is the reason we don't have commissions. Trump's deluded. You're inconsistent. That doesn't happen unless you know about May 28th, 29th, unless you know what Trump's statements about it are, unless you know who's in control of the Senate in 2020, unless you know that you have the receipts of him saying it. And so, yeah, I think it's a great moment. We have the clips, and we inserted it into our edit of the video because it's true. He's inconsistent. He had So that's kind of what I'm getting at. We can stop watching it, but like essentially, you take moments, anticipate what they're gonna say, and all of a sudden, a point that they thought that was in their favor, we're getting Tim Pool to say that Trump is deluded, that it's Trump's fault that there weren't arrests, that it's the Republicans' fault that there weren't commissions, and that, oh, by the way, Tim Pool's inconsistent on the term insurrection. That's what I mean by having an aggressive strategy, by having a plan, and by going on offense. You can't just be a passive recipient of a bunch of questions. And part of that, the awful truth is, you just need to know some stuff about how these conversations go. And it's pretty hard to pull that kind of stuff off if you don't actually know about these events. So basically, there was a protest outside of the White House after like the George Floyd stuff, because Trump said something inflammatory, like when the shooting starts, the looting starts. He basically talks shit, and a bunch of protesters came out. This is also where Rob inaccurately, or at least should say without any basis, claimed that there were Molotov cocktails, even though he has no evidence of it. There was a shack that was burned down. Rob has called it a guard station. Not a guard station. No evidence that it was a guard station. He basically saw a tweet that called, "They burned down an entire guard station." And that was his proof for it being a guard station. You can all see the exchanges on Twitter. But there was never an attempt to get onto the White House grounds. No one like attempted to climb the fence. They went through some barricades that were past where the White House actual fence was. They weren't attempting to get into the White House, but they kicked one of the little, those little police things down. And so Rob's like, "They tried to kill Trump," and Tim Pool does it. But Trump tweets and says, "Oh, this is no big deal. Like everything's cool. I was just going to inspect a bunker or something like that. Like my life was never in any danger. It's no big deal." And so they're all like, "I can't believe that more arrests didn't fucking happen." And I'm like, well, dude, Trump is the reason for that, right? Like Trump said it's no big deal. Why would the DOJ investigate something that's not a big deal? Why would the Republicans do commissions on something that's not a big deal? So it's their own fault, right? So what you just brought up to say the Democrats are bad, that's actually the Republicans' fault because they are the ones in charge of the potential for investigations. But what I mean is like, you kind of need to know it to make that point, right? Because if you don't know basically what happened in those days and what happened from the response from the federal government and who was in charge of the Senate, kind of hard to drive that home and actually, turn that around.
Corrupt against him and allowed lefties.
Trump was in charge of the DOJ. They could have indicted these people.
You have your fucking cake and eat it too. If Trump would have aggressively went after these people in the election season in 2020, you would have screamed, "Oh my God, the guy's a dictator." But when he wasn't, you're like, "Why didn't he arrest them?" It's bullshit. We know it.
I don't.
We know he should have deployed the National Guard in the lead up of the 2020 election, or would you have said he was a fascist?
I don't know if he should have deployed the National Guard.
So we should have just
Dude. Tom. The answer is no. Right? You say, no. The states were fine with their National Guards. Trump said so. And then you turn around him. Was Trump wrong? Yes. Oh, so Trump was wrong about that. Trump was also wrong about going after people on May 30th. Trump was also wrong about listening to the violent lefties on Kilmar Garcia. Seems like Trump's wrong a lot about this stuff. And maybe the person who's responsible for this unequal standard of justice that you're talking about is Trump himself, isn't it? You'd blame him, right? I happen to agree with Trump that he shouldn't have deployed the National Guard back in the day because we both agree that I think the states were handling it in the best way they could. And we didn't need federal involvement that probably would have inflamed things more than they already were. Trump should have shut the fuck up. That's how you, I think, address that. But if you're like, I don't really know. Now, if you really don't know about the case, but like this is BLM protest riot season. So I think it's a little easier to be like, all right, I don't know what May 30th is, but you knew what BLM riots and protests were, dude. Come on, man.
You're talking about January 6th.
No, I'm talking about Black Lives Matter in places like Kenosha, where Trump was offering to send in the National Guard, and the fuckhead leaders at Kenosha were like, no, we don't want that. Then they allowed the violence to get out of control, where a kid named Kyle Rittenhouse had to defend himself and ended up killing someone. Should Trump have overread the orders of the mayor and the governor and sent in the National Guard to prevent that? No, you would have said he's a fascist, wouldn't have you?
Well, yeah.
So then your argument is he should have just arrested more people. And you know what you would have said, Tom? Well, he's a fascist.
Well, he didn't do it. He's still a fascist.
Well, you know what you say there is, well, it's in D.C., so there's no one to override in D.C., and this is federal law enforcement. And enforcing federal law doesn't mean deploying the National Guard. In fact, deploying military assets it's actually against the law to enforce federal law with military. So there's nothing inconsistent about my position, Rob. I'm in favor of federal law enforcement enforcing federal law. That doesn't mean that I'm committed to deploying the National Guard, Rob. That's the kind of answer I'd expect.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, back to the point.
Wait, I thought you were.
No,
he's just interrupting you for this.
Oh.
You asked like 3 questions and then you answered. I was just making sure you had a chance to speak.
Yeah, overall, like when we look at the numbers, and again, it's every single time when we look at studies.
When we look at the numbers, the left does more violence, Tom? Because that's what you started the fucking debate with.
For violence, when we look at studies for how average time people are locked up, every single time you just, I don't believe that. I just don't think so.
Name me the study that showed that Black Lives Matter, the average Black Lives Matter protester, was arrested longer than the average January 6th person.
It was a DOJ study.
I don't believe it. I think that's absolute bullshit, and we all know.
I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
Absolute bullshit.
DOJ Associated Press.
I don't care if they're being violent or not. Just the fact you were there. That would mean that every time there was
You did say that, Tom. You did say, I don't care if they're violent on a debate about violence.
Act of violence, that there was considered an unlawful assembly of Black Lives Matter, that you think that every person in that crowd should have got years in prison.
Yes.
And your argument is you think that.
No, not. He's pushing you around. You didn't actually say that, Tom. He said about riots in which they said kill Trump, which I don't know where that happened in the BLM context. That was a hypothetical, but you didn't actually agree to that. And now you're biting a worse bullet. He's construing your words differently than the question he asked, and you're biting the bullet because do you not remember what he asked?
Black Lives Matter, that you think that every person in that crowd should have got years in prison.
Yes.
And your argument is you think that happened disproportionately more to Black Lives Matter than January 6th.
The amount of time that
it's outlandishly laughable, Tom.
Yes, because you don't believe in stats. You don't believe in studies. And every single time we bring up studies or bring up stats, you just hand wave them because you don't believe in anything scientific.
You said you don't trust most of the studies in your opening, Tom, or the first statements. You could just say you don't trust studies, Tom, because you said most of the studies are bullshit. But there are a few studies that are good. The Cato Institute, which you talked about for all of. No, actually, I don't even think you guys talked about it. Immediately, you went off the Cato study because you stopped talking about the conviction-based reporting of the Cato Institute or whatever you were saying. You went off somewhere else.
You just want to go with your feelings instead. What you saw on Fox News or what you saw on Steven Crowder is much easier to go with. Because
this is comfortable for Tom right now to just do this kind of like general, you suck, Rob, you suck. You don't believe in science. You just go off what happens on Fox News. So, I'm all here for this kind of mudslinging, but it is a little bit of a desperate maneuver.
That aligns with your fifis.
So first off, you just said...
He's desperately trying to get Rob to bite the bait here and swing back. That was comfortable for Tom, but it's a bit of a desperate maneuver here, Tom. Come on.
I think it was DOJ, and neither of us have the studies in front of us.
I think it was DOJ or AP.
Second, you concede at the outset that many of the organizations that do these studies are full of shit.
Yeah, you did say that. So who's denying studies here? Both of you are. You're on equal footing there, except for the Cato Institute study. That's the one, but that's enough to say that Rob discounts science, but you don't. But you don't.
Remember that?
Sure.
But now it's just me and my feelings.
That was great by Rob. Good memory by Rob. He tracked what's going on and he said the right thing. And now Tom. Oof, Tom, this is hard.
Say when you say something to everyone in this fucking crowd, and 90% of that,
and he knows it too. Tom,
people watching right now know. Are you fucking kidding me? Like the FBI went more aggressively after BLM than January 6th. It's a fucking joke. It was the largest task force in FBI fucking history.
I didn't say that they were full of shit. What I said is that some of them have weird methodology on how they're doing it.
Which makes them full of shit.
Okay.
You basically said that they're just some of them weird. I didn't say they were completely full of shit. I just said weird methodology. Oh no.
Like other people, like literally when we're talking about the Cato Institute, they think that that one's bullshit as well because it didn't include some.
So other people think the Cato one is bullshit, but what Rob is defending himself in the notion that you're all fact and science based, and he's all fifis. That's what you're trying to defend here, Tom. Tom is too fair. Tom is incredibly ultra fair.
Antifa guy who shot somebody and killed himself right after, but he never got convicted. The methodology is they're only going with convictions.
So there are two ways in which I think sometimes there's desperation. One is when you go too general, when you're like, Rob, you're just about fifis, you just watch Fox. So you go to like some very, very broad point because you're uncomfortable with the conversation is. Another way you can tell a little bit of desperation is going too narrow. Where you're like, and this point, and Will Chamberlain said that the Cato Institute, who was authored by it, and like you just get into like the nitty gritty of some fucking thing 10 miles away from what you're trying to be talking about. That's something when I know that when I feel like someone's on the ropes or I feel like I'm in a productive area, I'm like, okay, they're going super, super narrow and like, or like backing up 1,000 miles. Anything that is like significantly different in scope about the nature of what we were just talking about gets me like, okay, they're uncomfortable, so I'm going to keep going here. That's like an instant alarm bell. And so I just saw Tom in the span of 20 seconds do both. One, in the sense of his general, and also, I have to say, kind of ad hominem attack on Rob, basically saying, you just believe your fifis, you don't believe in studies. And then Rob's like, you just said yourself that you basically discount all the studies. And it's like, but this one Cato study that my mom read one time, and it was, Cato was founded by, and then I'm like, okay, dude, he's clearly not, he's clearly buying for time here. I think, and I love Tom. Tom's fair.
I think that is the most objective way to go about it.
So just
but even that doesn't align with people's fifis because they remember that one instance.
Hypothetically, right? If that's the case, and we're just looking at political violence, and your argument is law enforcement arrested harsher, more Black Lives Matter people, then the studies would objectively say that the left commits more violence.
They did. It was more Black Lives Matter people, but again, it was more time on average that they spent in prison. But yes, also again, yes.
So then the studies you're referencing do say that in the year 2020, the left committed far more violence, seeing as how they were arrested more.
Well, the thing is, he's just getting Tom to concede what he already conceded. But this is great for Rob, because what Tom is saying is, well, obviously we have to do per capita because so many more leftists committed violence. And that's the nature of the debate, is who did more violence, right? I spoke last time about the need to clarify terminology here, and also how we're going to like magnify the amount of violence based on our intuitions about the harm it caused, like someone throwing a rock versus someone stabbing and killing or politically assassinating a politician. But Rob, having no clarity on that from Tom, is able to basically use and wave around what appears to be a full-on proposition concession from Tom in the beginning, and now a kind of implicit concession. And the way Rob is selling it, even though he already knows he's got it, is that he just uncovered it and that Tom just walked into it. So even optically, it's really good for Rob. Thank you, Charlie November. Charlie November.
No, because the studies are on murders, not on instances.
Okay, but the ones that aren't like CISA, the Prosecution Project, those ones that aren't just murders, they will say in 2020 the left committed more violence. They will not.
No, every single one that has any that
that's
includes,
not just vandalism, Tom. You just told me it's not just vandalism. You said everyone that's at one of these unlawful assemblies should go to prison for years. Sure. Surely you don't think anyone commits an act of vandalism.
I'm sorry. If you're
okay, now you have to wind that back, yeah, because you have to wind that back.
You're saying they're being at a protest, and then like there's 10,000 people there, and 100 of them start rioting. That all
okay. Tom, but that was the point, bro.
10,000 should go to prison. No,
that's what you said about January 6th.
Yes,
you said you didn't give a shit.
Oh no,
if they were violent.
That is very different.
So that is very different. That is, well, what's the difference? Because you didn't say that.
Because there are because you know that there's a ton of people who did not go onto private property and stayed.
Private property. Oh, I didn't know that the Capitol was private property. I think you're looking for is restricted areas. But then he's just going to say, well, did they declare it a restricted area? Were they allowed to be there? So you got to be prepared for this, Tom. Because you can't say private property. You're going to say, that's not private. private property. Huh? Or maybe he's saying it's different because the BLM occurred at private property, but the specific example used was outside the White House, and that's public.
Because there are because you know that there's a ton of people who did not go onto private property and stayed protesting. Yes, but they weren't just trespassing. Again, they were part of a group that it has obvious intentions in getting into the Capitol and breaking into the building to stop the election.
If they were there to steal the country, why didn't they? They clearly overwhelmed law enforcement.
They were there to delay the certification of the vote, which they did.
Really?
Yes.
That's all they were there for.
So
they left happy then. We did it. We saved the country.
Different groups had different intentions, but yes,
different groups had different intentions. But you just said all of them went in had that same intention.
No, I'm saying that was at minimum the intention, but some of them were there to
okay, so then why do you think the people were protesting Black Lives Matter?
Why was Black Lives Matter?
Why were they protesting?
Why was Black Lives Matter protesting, or why were people?
Tom, you gotta ask a question every now and then.
And I'm trespassing. Why am I there?
At the White House? What are you
talking about?
What are you talking about? That's what I'm
Your implication, are you legitimately going to tell me that January 6th is unique? That's the only time that people that weren't engaged in active violence ought to spend 3 years in prison? But if there's other left-wing acts of violence where there's unlawful assemblies and there's trespassing, that the people in that crowd, somehow we don't say that their motivations align with the rioters,
yes,
so we don't punish them?
Taking part in it, yes, obviously.
Okay.
So if they are trespassing along with other people going into a building,
they should go to jail for 3 years.
Well, it's not just going to the building.
Just the same as the people with the intent.
If they're on public property and it's considered an unlawful assembly, that would be basically the equivalent of trespassing, correct?
Possibly.
Okay, so then every one of these incidents that was declared because there was a riot, an unlawful assembly, and hundreds or not thousands of people stuck around, all of them deserve years in prison.
I don't believe that you think this is an honest question, because obviously that's ridiculous. When you are heading towards a Capitol building in a mob all at once, and you just listened to your president for the last week talk about the fact that the election was stolen, you just listened to him for 3 hours on stage talk about the fact that the election is stolen, and then all of you are rushing towards the Capitol where they say...
But you should know what he's going to say in response to this, which is like, but look at how the left basically said that all cops are racist and how we need to get rid of cops and cops are pigs and fuck the police, and just gotta be ready for that. Like, you can make a particulars story all you want, but at base you can just say something like, if you're trying to compare these two events and say, yeah, I think that minimally, in order to know that someone is should be included in our denominator, they have to have committed a crime. And I don't think mere presence at a place where you have no right to be is necessarily violence, as I understand it, or a crime in the case of, like, just because you are someplace and crime occurs nearby that you're necessarily committing violence. You just got to be very clear about what the denominator here and what are we actually looking for. Are we looking for whether the reaction was more severe with one group versus the other? Are we looking for whether there were more of one group versus the other? Whether there was a unified intent to do a specific thing? The magnitude of the harm of what was intended? So, like, it's really unclear what we're actually talking about and what we're comparing. And that is the fault, I think, mostly of Tom. Because Rob loved this ambiguity. That's where he gets all of his productivity from, is in keeping the question unclear and just getting a bunch of talking time and questions asked to make the other side, arguably advocating for violence or basically conceding they don't know. But a lot of this could be cleared up if we just took some effort to hash out what we're even talking about. Like, I doubt any of you could accurately state what it is. Something about, well, one side got it easier, other side got it harder, but not clear in which ways we're referencing. Are we talking about the pardon after the fact, the amount of time, the amount of convictions, the amount of actual crime where there was no even arrest, our attitudes overall, the amount of people involved in either? Like, it's so unclear to me what we're even talking about. Like, why you were unable to be successful on January 6th.
They are inside right now stealing the election from him. Obviously, yes, I think they all know what they're going to the Capitol for. Unless you think they went there just to take a tour for some reason while it was closed, that would be insane. Is that what you think, Rob?
I think they were there for protest because they felt. And
first question from Tom, and already he's way more comfortable. You got to do more of this, Tom. Now give him an opportunity to trip over his words.
probably correctly that the election was stolen. It was stolen in multiple ways. One, it could be because of the mail-in ballots and fraudulence that could have happened there, but it's also stolen in the fact that our agencies, including the very FBI that you're lauding and saying we need to trust their studies, that all of your studies are contingent upon their arrest records, actually engaged in a double standard of actually promoting bullshit stories against Donald Trump for 4 years and illegally spying on him while downplaying the actual legitimate story of the Hunter Biden laptop that 51 former intel officials.
And look, he asked that one question, and now he's way more comfortable because now he sounds like Hunter Biden. Da, 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 like, great. That's why you ask more questions. Ask more questions, bro.
Said was bullshit. Both instances are intel agencies. What did they say, Tom? What did they say?
They said
it had the hallmarks of being bullshit.
Yes.
And you believe that? You believe that wasn't them being dishonest?
But now, oh no, Tom, we got to be prepared for the Hunter Biden memes, okay?
No, if you read it, it literally says we are not making a claim.
Oh, good. Tom is learning. I'm going back in time to give him certain of my talking points. What you should bring up is Alexander Smirnov next and say, and the reason that there was, the intel community, even though these people were formers, had good reason to think that there was Russian interference because guess what? No guy named Alexander Smirnov, blah, 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 blah. See, these conversations, there's a rhythm to it. There's a repetition to it. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
As to whether or not this is valid or not. They literally say we are not making a claim to the validity of it.
I mean, Tom,
wait. You agree they said that, right?
Boom, 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 boom. Great. See? This is why you got to grab the convo by the balls. Is this Darth Jar Jar? These streams are like sand.
You just lied saying that they said it was bullshit. No. Yes, you lied.
If I go back and watch your videos, you're going to say, yep, I'm saying nothing here. This is just a bullshit throwaway statement. These former 51, they're not saying anything happened. It's just saying this is something that could be Russian disinformation. That's it. You think that was their intent?
Do you think looking at it that it had the hallmarks of Russian disinformation?
No.
No?
I think it had the hallmarks of what the FBI calls Russian disinformation. Do you acknowledge that the person that drafted that letter in emails was saying that they were trying to get that information out before the debate to help Joe Biden?
Yes.
Oh, but they weren't saying anything. They weren't saying anything. It wasn't them being corrupt, trying to influence.
So the question is what they said, Rob. Yeah, they had an intent to get this out there before X. But what is this? And you just said that what they said was, did Pisco apologize to Adam Friedland and Sitchip? Adam Friedland has not received an apology from me, nor will he ever get one for what he did. He pooped on that chair. And Stitch, likewise, an illegal alien arriving on a planet.
They didn't say anything. Then why were they rushing it out there to help Biden in the debate if this was just a benign statement that wasn't intended to help anyone?
Because the people had already started running with a narrative without the evidence for it. And so if they had evidence of something that they thought was different, they
what fucking word salad is this? What does that have to do with shit?
Word salad. You didn't understand what I just said? Is that confusing?
We have about 15 minutes till we go to the closing. So let me just read the super chats real quick. I apologize for the speed interruption. Yeah, well, because we had closings, so we got audience questions.
That changes what I was going to say. That's fine. I thought we were going until 10 and then audience questions.
Oh, well, I mean, we can.
It's all right. I don't care. Whatever we do.
Don't worry, we'll go as long as it needs to go. We'll go. But anyway, let me read these. I'm trying to do audience questions every 15 minutes. Super checks. Reverse Master says, your 7K checks in the mail. Jam. I don't know what time that's out. It's loud.
There's a riot out there. There's some right wingers that need to be arrested.
Bastards, bro. I didn't get out here without my guns. Anyway, Captain Near said, Tommy destroyed can feel his embarrassment out here in Australia. The fake country. Australia's not real, so you're not real. PGG says, Tom, you did over 1.2 billion damages that include private property. Damage you want to compare to January 6th, very illusional.
Right.
Check says
okay.
That's $20 billion.
I think we've seen enough for now. We might come back to it later. All right, folks, let's talk Texas gerrymander. Do I have any Dems in the chat? Any Dems in the chat? Any excited Dems looking to make a splash in the election 2026? Any excited Trump supporters who want to protect their daddy Trump and are worried about the election? Folks, let's get into it, all right? So, I think it's a possibility that the Texas gerrymander fails. We'll see. We'll see. Here's something to know, though. Deadlines are coming up. You feel me? The deadlines are coming up. And there's not a ton of time. We're less than a year away from the 2026 elections. You get me? Who agrees with that statement? And so this is all happening on an expedited schedule. And eventually people are going to have to like sign up, for the primaries. Remember, there's a whole primary process that has to happen for these districts. So let's think about this, right? Trump, in order to try to maintain majorities in the House of Representatives, right? This is specifically for the House, not the Senate. Senate doesn't have to deal with gerrymandering. Why? Because it's all the state. The senator is for the entire state. But how we do the House of Representatives now, we have pretty much single member districts across the country. I think that's true. So the gerrymandering affects the House of Representatives. Right now, I think there's like a 3-vote edge for the Republicans. 3 to 4 votes, something like that, is the margin that makes Mike Johnson speaker versus Hakeem Jeffries. And so Trump's like, how can I get a little froggy? How do I get in there? Do some little tricks of the trade. And so he starts calling up his friends in state legislatures and governor's offices and saying, I need you to do mid-decade redistricting. It's not unheard of to happen, but in this kind of like blatantly political fashion in states where there's no like judicial remedy being ordered to do it. This is a pure act of like political partisanship, not to like conform with some judicial map or some state law elsewhere, but like specifically for the purpose of increasing partisan gerrymandering before decade redistricting, okay? And the big opportunity for the Republicans, there's others. They're having less luck in some of these other states and more luck in some states. We'll see. There is also, by the way, some Republicans who don't like this, and I'll tell you why in a sec as well. But one of the big prizes is Texas. They have a lot of opportunities to pick up essentially 4 or 5 seats in Texas for Republicans by recutting the lines. Eliminating, by the way, I think Jasmine Crockett's seat probably. Here are some potential drawbacks for Republicans and why it hasn't been like this uniform excitement at the Republican effort. One, they're aware that this is going to engender some pushback from Democrats who did so, right? In stunning numbers in California and elsewhere. Virginia is a place where they're looking for it. Illinois, potentially New Jersey, New York before 2028, but there's some annoying process that needs to happen. Because a lot of these left-wing states had their own state provisions against partisan gerrymandering that they have to like somehow overcome either by constitutional provision, a new law, a new legislature, something like that. The Republicans also who live in these blue states, they're scared that the Democratic pushback is going to eliminate their seats. So you're seeing California Republicans like really pissed that they decided to do this with Texas. There's also a broader concern. If the Democrats win by enough, because what you're doing is you're cramming all of your opposition in either one district or spreading them thin across other districts to create a good proportional spread and maximize the number of seats. But intrinsically what that does is lower your margin in other places where you're safer, which would necessarily be a safer seat. You're lowering the threshold a bit there, making it a less comfortable win. Now, oftentimes it doesn't matter because if you win by 10, no different than if you win by 25. However, when the Democrats start to overperform the inherent partisanship of districts, sort of like what we see in the 2025 election by 6 or by polling, right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points. Now it starts to become a less comfortable seat for these people. And there's even a margin at which the gerrymander can backfire. And so those are real concerns. Those are real concerns that some of these Republicans don't want to have a 2-margin race. And so it's not entirely clear that Trump's incentives, which are often like high risk, high reward type thing, always fight, always try to pull the trick, always push, aligns with the interests of some of the other factions within the overall Republican framework, including state Republicans who want to protect some of their incumbents and avoid from the worst possible outcome, and then Republicans who live in and who are afraid of Democrat retaliation. So, yeah, that's what happened. And as you'll see in this lawsuit, Trump's initial efforts to push Texas into adopting a new gerrymander were unsuccessful. It was until a particular moment that Texas decided to give in. And you'll see why that is so deliciously problematic. Now, I'm not here to give you copium. This Supreme Court is partisan as hell. They put the force of the entire, hand on the scale, not just a finger, their entire arm, and sometimes other parts of their body as well on the scale for Republicans. So don't take this as the final word here, but you can start to see the mess they've put themselves in by just taking a look at the opinion. We're not going to go through this entire opinion. We're just going to get a sense of it so you guys can see the kind of issues we're talking about. And we'll start. This is a panel of 3 judges, 3 district judges. Federal statute says that in these kinds of cases related to districting in the constitutionality or lawfulness of certain districts, the procedure is to have a 3-panel district judge look at the case, come to determinations, and then you can appeal directly to the Supreme Court. So this is going to be appealed and is being appealed because it was ruled against Texas to the Supreme Court of the United States directly, not into the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the usual intermediate appellate court that sits above the Texas district courts. Okay. And it starts, and the panel consists of 2 Trump appointees and I think a Biden or Obama appointee. And the opinion, it's a 2-1 case with the Trump appointed judge writing for the majority here. Jeffrey V. Brown, U.S. District Judge. Right? U.S. District Judge Jeffrey Brown delivers the opinion of the court, which senior U.S. District Judge David C. Guadarrama, some Democrat appointed this guy, and the Circuit Judge Jerry E. Smith will file a dissenting opinion. So I guess they have someone from the Fifth Circuit in the panel or something. I don't know. Anyway, in August 2025, the state of Texas enacted a new electoral map to govern elections for the U.S. House of Representatives. Claiming that the 2025 map is racially discriminatory, 6 groups of plaintiffs asked the court to preliminarily enjoin the state from using the 2025 map. For the reasons explained below, the court preliminarily enjoins, that is, prevents the state from using the 2025 map and orders them to run the 2026 election according to the previous map, the ungerrymandered map. So what is the claim here, right? The claim is racial discrimination. And you'll see the different theories here. And you're like, wait a second. I thought that there was a Supreme Court case called Rucho versus Common Cause. Some of you might be thinking of this, the legally inclined among you, that said that partisan gerrymandering is okay and that you can redistrict for political reasons. Why are they talking about race? What the fuck? Oh, dear viewer, just wait. Starts with a bolded quote from Chief Justice John Roberts. And this is a famous quote. The way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. Footnote 2. By the way, this is from the parents involved case. This quote, I mean, it's funny. Remind you a little bit of Ryan Mullally's commentary the other day. There actually are some bases to lawfully discriminate on the basis of race. And we'll talk about that as well. The public perception of this case is that it's all about politics. To be sure, politics played a role in drawing the 2025 map. But it was more than just politics. Substantial evidence shows that Texas racially gerrymandered the 2025 map. Here's why. Earlier this year, Trump began urging Texas to redraw its U.S. House map to create 5 additional seats. Lawmakers reportedly met that request to redistrict on purely partisan grounds with apprehension. When the governor announced his intent to call a special legislative session, he didn't even place redistricting on the legislative agenda. Do you remember this? This was right before when the floods were happening, and everyone's like, in the middle of the floods, you guys are going to take up redistricting in Texas. Do you remember this stuff? You're brain dead. If I can't reach your heart, let me reach your head, your brain. But when the Trump administration reframed its request as a demand to redistrict congressional seats based on their racial makeup, Texas lawmakers immediately jumped on board. On July 7, Harmeet Dillon, the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice, sent a letter to the governor and attorney general of Texas making the legally incorrect assertion that 4 congressional districts in Texas were unconstitutional because they were coalition districts, majority non-white districts in which no single racial group constituted 50% majority. So this is a term that's a lot in this opinion. Again, we're not going to read the whole opinion, but it's a term you should be familiar with. A coalition district is not a minority-majority district in the sense of one single group constituting a majority that is overall a minority. It is a district in which non-whites constitute a majority. A coalition, right? Groups of different groups coming together. That is, Black people, Hispanics, Asians, right? Like minorities make up the majority. Or non-white minorities make up the majority. Okay? So the DOJ, because they're not getting anywhere by requesting Texas to do it on partisan basis, they say, hey, you guys, you have to redistrict in Texas because you have 4 congressional districts that are illegal coalition districts, which the court here construes as an incorrect legal assertion. In the letter, DOJ threatened legal action if Texas didn't immediately dismantle and redraw these districts, a threat based entirely on their racial makeup, right? So Trump shoots himself in the foot often with this kind of shit. He doesn't want to send a letter because he's not getting anywhere with his calls. He wants to use the threat of DOJ action. Or he wants to get things done. And so he'll go and do something that he thinks justifies him, perhaps in the eyes of the public or according to Republican talking points. The difference is when you do that according to Republican talking points and your interpretation of Fifth Circuit precedent, you can cause troubles with litigation in terms of your statements. Now, unfortunately, sometimes the Supreme Court lets you off the hook. See Trump versus Hawaii in the Muslim ban case, where they didn't really take much stock in the words he used for purposes of divining his intent. But it does happen, and occasionally it causes him problems. He gets the DOJ to send a letter to Texas and say, right, a Republican state, not to redraw your lines on partisan basis or we'll sue you. Because, of course, why would the DOJ be responsible for or have an interest in pushing partisan gerrymandering? They don't have an interest in that, right? But what actually does the DOJ oversee? They oversee the Civil Rights Division, and there are civil rights laws that they actually do enforce. So that's why the letter from the DOJ relates to racial gerrymandering and their interpretation of an illegal racial gerrymander, in the sense that these coalition districts, the minority of different groups, districts, that those districts in their minds are not okay. And they're not okay because of why? They're not okay because they're racially gerrymandered. Okay? And those racial gerrymanders, according to them, are unconstitutional. Coalition districts are unconstitutional or unlawful for other reasons. Either unconstitutional or violative of Section 2 of the Voter Rights Act. Okay? In the letter, DOJ threatened legal action if Texas didn't immediately dismantle and redraw the districts, a threat based on their racial makeup. That's the argument, right? Notably, the DOJ letter targeted only majority non-white districts. Any mention of majority white Democrat districts, which DOJ presumably would have also targeted if its aims were partisan rather than racial, was conspicuously absent. So understand how this argument goes from the court. The court is saying, we don't read this DOJ letter, even though it was obviously political, right? Why is Trump doing this? Trump doesn't care about racial gerrymandering. He cares about the seats. No shit. So it's a kind of like, what's the real reason and what's the reason given on paper? But what the court is saying here is, in their letter, the DOJ didn't mention majority white Democratic districts, which do exist. If it were a partisan gerrymander, usually that's wrong, right? Like usually it would be wrong to say that the DOJ is acting in a partisan fashion. But here, actually, as you'll see, it hurts the government, who's not technically a party, it's the state of Texas, right? But the government who's very much involved in this, it hurts the government in that sense. It hurts Trump that this was racial and not partisan. The letter doesn't cite any partisan concern. And if it was, you would expect them to be talking about the majority white district. It didn't. It cited the coalition districts. No, you dumb piece of shit. This guy, DebateBoard, is like the dumbest fucking reply guy I ever have. Dude, chill for a second. They're obviously going to address that decision that was cited in the letter. What are you, some kind of like simpleton? What is wrong with you? This guy is so dumb. He's always in my comments typing up the dumbest, longest shit that no one reads except for people who who want to engage with the lowest common denominator. You dumb piece of shit. You think that this court just ignored the ruling that's cited in the fucking letter that they're analyzing, you dipshit? Based on reading the first fucking intro page? You loser fuck. Join VC one of these days, dipshit. What an idiot. He's like, yeah, they ignored this. Oh my God, I'm in the first page. Dude. Crazy. 2 days later, citing the DOJ letter, the governor added redistricting to the special sessions legislative agenda. So after the letter, after Trump comes and says, hey, this is an unconstitutional or unlawful racial gerrymander, then the Texas legislature comes in and says, the governor says, let's add this to the agenda. That's a problem, as you'll see. In doing so, the governor explicitly directed the legislature to draw a new U.S. House map to resolve specifically the DOJ concerns. In other words, the governor explicitly directed the legislature to redistrict based on race. There is no ambiguity there, right? You'll see the actual statement that Abbott made. The actual statement that Abbott made, the actual rationale given by Abbott, that is premised on race-based gerrymandering, right? Because if you're saying, hey, we need to undo these coalition districts and gerrymander to get rid of these, if the only way to divine whether we're gotten rid of a coalition district is by reference to race, then you are by definition doing a race-based gerrymander. Now, you could say that it's required by law, but that presupposes you getting the holding of the Fifth Circuit. You get me? So you'll see what Abbott said. But if you explicitly premise your redistricting effort, like imagine that Governor Abbott said the following, right? Take it as a fact. Hey, we just got a letter from Trump. He said there's too many black districts. So can you get rid of all these black districts and make more white districts? And then they do it, right? Everyone would agree, obviously, racial gerrymander. This is what Abbott said. Essentially, you'll see. Hey, we have too many Black, Hispanic, Asian, and minority districts. Not enough white districts. Now, it's premised on an understanding, a false understanding, according to the panel here, of what the Fifth Circuit has said. And, wait to see what SCOTUS will say. But it's hard to argue that the basis here is related to race. And the only way that you could, that the lines are being drawn specifically to address issues of racial composition. In press appearances, the governor plainly and expressly disavowed any partisan objective. So not only did he say, right, because remember, partisan gerrymandering is allowed. Partisan gerrymandering is legal. That's one of the reasons I expect California's gerrymander to be okay. We'll see about that. There's also a lawsuit from the DOJ against the California gerrymander, but not the Texas gerrymander. We love the explicit partisan nature of the DOJ, but I don't know how much difference it'll make. But partisan gerrymandering is explicitly allowed under Rucho versus Common Cause. That was the Supreme Court's choice. They say racial gerrymandering not okay, partisan gerrymandering okay. And Abbott, in trying to play the PR game, said, this is not partisan, right? They're trying to say, no, Gavin Newsom, they started it because this isn't partisan. This is correcting a racial gerrymander. But in saying that, in disavowing the constitutionally permissible partisan gerrymander for purposes of winning a PR war and claiming that they're not doing partisan gerrymandering, and actually it's the Democrats who started it, in doing so, the only thing left to consider is that the Texas legislature gerrymandered based on these coalition districts. In other words, redistrict based on race. So you see how the PR goal and agenda of Abbott to disclaim partisan gerrymandering goes against Abbott. The stick approach from Trump pushes him to send the coalition district letter because the different incentives, one being a PR incentive, the other being how do I use the DOJ to achieve my political outcomes incentives in a way that's even facially acceptable, other than like the DOJ coming in and saying, hey, sending a letter to the different states to say we want more Republicans here directly, which at this point they might as well do it. I mean, they're all but saying that kind of stuff. In fact, I think they're saying it. But yeah, the legislature adopted those racial objectives. The redistricting bill sponsor made numerous statements suggesting they had intentionally manipulated the district's line to create more majority Hispanic and majority black districts. The bill's sponsor statement suggests they adopted those changes because such a map would be an easier sell than a purely partisan one. So they're like, we're making more racially pure districts. We're getting rid of these coalition districts. So we are now going to make them affect their racial composition because it's easier to sell than the partisan ones. The Speaker of the House also issued a press release celebrating the bill satisfactorily addressing DOJ's concerns. Other high-ranking legislators stated in media interviews that the legislature had redistricted not for political goals of appeasing the president, nor gaining 5 Republican seats, but to achieve the DOJ's racial goal of eliminating coalition districts. The map, ultimately passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, achieved all but one of the racial objectives the DOJ demanded. The legislature dismantled and left unrecognizable not only all of the districts the DOJ identified in letter, but also several other coalition districts around the state. For these and other reasons, the plaintiff groups are likely to prove at trial that Texas racially gerrymandered the 2025 map, so we preliminarily enjoin the Texas 2025 map. So a racial gerrymander, as you'll see, is unconstitutional. And presumably, this finding doesn't relate to Section 2. Now, there's a way in which it might, right? Maybe the Supreme Court will pull some bullshit like, well, a misapprehension of what Section 2 requires is itself not race-based, even if the underlying thing is race. I think it's fucking dumb. But we'll see what they say. So this is the law governing racial discrimination challenges to redistricting. The first is the racial gerrymandering claim. This is not under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which deals with like specifically targeting certain kinds of sufficiently compact and cohesive minority groups for the purpose of, or not even necessarily for the purpose of, but in effect, diluting their vote. A racial gerrymander is more specific. It requires intent of racial discrimination. One thing that's separate from the VRA context is that Section 2 does not require racial motivated intent. That's why it's been a target for a lot of conservatives for a while. So you don't need to actually prove racial motivated intent in the VRA context. But a racial gerrymandering, which is race-based in intent, that absolutely is unconstitutional. It's not just it's possible you can have vote dilution through a racial gerrymander, conceivably, right? But they're analytically different, as the court puts out. First, a plaintiff can bring a racial gerrymandering claim under the 14th and 15th Amendment. A racial gerrymander claim alleges that state without sufficient justification, right? This is strict scrutiny, equal protection, right? Strict scrutiny. Or alternatively, 15th Amendment, has separated its citizens into different voting districts on the basis of race. The plaintiff must prove that the state subordinated race-neutral districting criteria to racial consideration, such that race was the predominant factor motivating the legislature's decision to place a significant number of voters within or without a particular district, which is analytically distinct from a racial gerrymandering claim and follows a different analysis. An intentional vote dilution claim alleges that the state has enacted a particular voting scheme as a purposeful device to minimize or cancel out the voting potential of racial or ethnic minorities. Intentional vote dilution violates both the Constitution and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. To prevail on the intentional vote dilution claim, the plaintiff must show that the state's districting plan has a purpose and effect of diluting the minority vote. And then finally, you have the Jingles framework, which is effects-based vote dilution. Both of the first two claims require the plaintiff to prove the legislature acted with some sort of unlawful intent. To supplement these intent-based cause of action, Congress amended the VRA, I think sometime in the 70s or 80s or something, to enable plaintiffs to challenge electoral maps based on their racially dilutive effects alone. To prevail on an effects-based vote dilution claim, you need the preconditions from Jingles. The first and second are defined with reference to a minority group. Precondition 1 asks whether the minority group is sufficiently large and geographically compact to constitute a majority in a reasonably configured district that the legislature could have drawn. Precondition 2 asks whether the minority group is politically cohesive. So imagine, right, like you have a sufficiently large and geographically compact group of black voters, but they all vote like very differently. It's like a very random set of decisions on where to vote for, right? Then they don't satisfy the notion of like vote dilution. If you can't predict the way, or it's not super easy in the sense of cohesion to know that this group of people will vote for one set of candidates or set of issues, then they're not cohesive enough to bring in the vote dilution claim. Kind of weird, right? But it's merely the notion of like, this is about subordination of a group. And so if the group has like shared interests with the majority group, in what sense can they be, what is their actual will that's being subordinated? In what sense are you subordinating? In what sense are you diluting the voice of people who have very varied opinions and they're not sufficiently cohesive? So those are the first two preconditions, about large in number, sufficiently compact in shape. So if they're just spread out everywhere, not as easy. And then that they like generally agree on who they vote for. Critical to this case, the law governing how to define the requisite minority group has shifted over time. From 88 to 2024, a Fifth Circuit case, Campos, permitted Jingles claimants to define the minority group as a coalition of two or more races. Campos thus permitted plaintiffs to satisfy Jingles prerequisites by showing that it would be possible to draw a coalition district, a district in which no single race constituted more than 50% of the voting population, but in which the total minority exceeded 50% in the aggregate. To avoid the possibility that a court might invalidate their districting plans under Campos, legislatures sometimes needed to preemptively enact maps that contained one or more coalition districts. So what they're describing is there was a period of time in which the good law was you were able to define your minority group as more than one minority group, right? Black people and Hispanic people together. That's who you're subordinating. That's the coalition district. This is a kind of a nuanced point, so just try to bear with me. In 2024, the in-bank Fifth Circuit overruled Campos and Pettyway versus Galveston County. Pettyway holds that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act does not authorize separately protected minority groups to aggregate their population for purposes of a vote dilution claim. Understand what that is saying, right? This is saying that plaintiffs aren't allowed to raise Voting Rights Act Section 2 claims as a coalition district. Does this say that coalition districts are de facto unlawful? No, right? It's saying what would be justified to bring under the VRA as a Section 2 claim as a plaintiff. But this doesn't say that every coalition district is unconstitutional, right? Just doesn't say that. To satisfy Jangles, a plaintiff in this circuit must now prove that a single racial group could constitute a numerical majority in the plaintiff's proposed district, not a coalition. So this change in the law, the overruling of Campos by the Fifth Circuit, is addressing what is allowed for plaintiffs to bring. Pettyway changed the applicable standard only for effects-based vote dilution claims under the VRA and Jangles. Pettyway did not modify the legal standards governing intentional vote dilution claims or racial gerrymandering claims under the Constitution because no such claims were before the in-bank court, right? So the scope of the opinion that was overturning Campos in the Fifth Circuit related to the vote dilution theories, not to intentional discrimination, and whether it constitutes racial gerrymandering or anything like that. Furthermore, Pettyway holds only that Section 2 does not require legislatures to draw precinct lines for the electoral benefit of multiracial coalitions. Pettyway nowhere implies that legislatures must deliberately avoid coalition districts. You get that? Or that a legislatively drawn map that happens to contain one or more coalition districts is somehow unlawful. This point is critical to this case. So important for you guys to understand. This case from the Fifth Circuit, right, was the justification for the Trump DOJ to basically lean on the Texas government, both the executive and legislature of the government. And what the court here is notice, is that there's a distinction between what the VRA allows for plaintiffs and what is rendered unlawful by itself. So just because the VRA says that you can't, according to the updated case law, that you can't, as a plaintiff, claim a coalition district, doesn't mean that they must be avoided by the legislature. Or that if you somehow create such districts, not like intentionally based on, right? Like let's say you just have coalition districts because you drew the lines for whatever way, but not based on race, that doesn't mean that those districts are suspect in and of themselves. In Rucho versus Common Cause, SCOTUS said partisan gerrymandering aren't cognizable in federal court. Some states have those matters, but it's a political question, right? So you are able to raise partisan motivation as a defense. So you can say, basically what the court is signaling here is you could have just partisan gerrymandered the state. And that if you had done that, you would have been okay. This is why, this is like the kind of Shakespearean tragedy of it for the pro-Trump position. In that they could have trivially just said, we are trying to help the Republicans. We want to help Trump. We want to maintain Republican majority. That's what we're doing these new maps for. And this is what we do. Instead, they're like, let us draw maps based on race. Now, ultimately, they might have the last laugh because SCOTUS might just say, the law doesn't really matter. We can just do whatever we want. In the 2021 map, 4 years before the 2025 maps, the state redrew the map to account for population shifts in the 2020 census. 4 of the districts are relevant here. So we have some districts. Here we have a coalition district, right? Defined because we have a majority by a coalition of racial minorities, non-white. Here's another coalition district. Here's not a coalition district, right? So why is this not a coalition district? Because we have a majority-minority district. Hispanic is over the threshold. Uh-oh. That's another problem for Trump. If some of the districts you're redistricting aren't even coalition districts, it seems like you don't even have, you just did a racial gerrymander with no justification for some of these. Maybe, we'll see. And here's another coalition district. Right? You get how this is not a coalition district? When the legislature enacted the map, the Fifth Circuit had not yet decided Pettyway. Because the 2021 versions of these 3 districts were more than 50% non-white with no single group constituting a numerical majority, these districts were coalition districts. The sponsor of the bill that became the 2021 map, Senator Joan Huffman, stated repeatedly that the map makers did not look at any racial data as they drew the map. They based the district boundaries exclusively on race-neutral considerations. So this is the map that is the partisan gerrymander. The plan that the map makers drew on partisan grounds appeared to also satisfy Section 2 of the VRA as Campos interpreted it, so the legislature passed the map. If we take Senator Huffman at her word, then any coalition districts that ended up in the 2021 map were a coincidental byproduct of the legislature's decision to draw district lines based on race-neutral considerations like partisanships, right? It's not that coalition districts were made illegal by the opinion. It's that they were not cognizable as a racial group for plaintiffs to take advantage of under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Very different. What we're talking about here is like it happens to end up to be a coalition district. And the makers of the map say, we didn't consider race, we were just trying to help the Republicans. In other words, there's no evidence in the preliminary injunction record that the legislature purposely drew coalition districts that it wouldn't have otherwise drawn based on concerns that a court would otherwise invalidate the map under Section 2 in Campos. There's no indication that the 2021 legislature placed a thumb on the scale in favor of minority coalitions based on a now discredited interpretation of Section 2. So the people who are arguing, remember that guy, whoever the fucking loser was, this stupid man who goes in my comments, he says all these things, right? He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know. Now, we'll see. We'll see what SCOTUS says, but it's hard to say that these coalition districts were drawn specifically to satisfy a discredited interpretation of law if the intent was never to do that, to satisfy it, and it was done purely for partisan reasons. Now watch this draft. Beginning in February, March 2025, and continuing in earnest in April and May, Republicans met with contacts in the White House to discuss the prospect of Texas redrawing its map In June, the New York Times published an article reporting the President Trump's political team was encouraging these motherfuckers to examine how House districts in the state could be drawn ahead of the midterm elections. The press coverage contemporaneously indicated that partisan rather than racial motivations were behind the redistricting push, right? So the press coverage said, yeah, we want to win. So everyone believes and agrees that initially, right, Trump is just trying to get those House members, man. By all appearances, however, Republican lawmakers didn't have much appetite to redistrict on purely partisan grounds, even at the president's behest. The same New York Times article reported that the push from Washington had unnerved some Texas Republicans who worried that reworking the boundaries of Texas House seats to turn Democratic districts red by adding reliably Republican voters from neighboring Republican districts could backfire in an election that is already expected to favor Democrats. Rather than flip Democratic districts, Texas lawmakers feared that the new lines could endanger incumbent Republicans. At an emergency meeting in the Capitol, shortly before the New York Times article was published, congressional Republicans from Texas professed little interest in redrawing their districts. Perhaps due to this apparent lack of interest, when the governor announced on June 23, 2025, he was calling a session, he wasn't calling redistricting. As far as some influential members of the legislature were aware, the prospect of redistricting in 2025 was just a rumor. In fact, at the bench trial this court held on the 2021 map in June 2025, when counsel asked Senator Huffman whether the Texas legislature might be considering redrawing the congressional districts, as reported by the New York Times, she unequivocally responded, they are not. Instead, what ultimately spurred Texas to redistrict was a letter that the DOJ sent to Governor and Texas Attorney General on July 7th. The letter exhorted Texas to redistrict for a very different reason than political objectives. Because the letter is critical to our analysis, we reproduce it here in full. Unconstitutional race-based congressional district. The very first thing. The subject. Race. Dear Governor Abbott and Attorney General Paxton. Fellow Republicans. This letter will serve as formal notice by the Department of Justice to the state of Texas of serious concerns regarding the legality of 4 of Texas's congressional districts. As stated below, the 4 districts currently constitute unconstitutional coalition districts, and we urge the state of Texas to rectify these race-based considerations from these specific districts. Remember, one of these districts is not a coalition district. In Allen v. Milligan, Justice Kavanaugh noted that even if Congress in 1982 could constitutionally authorize race-based redistricting under Section 2 for some period of time, the authority to conduct race-based redistricting cannot extend indefinitely into the future. In SFFA versus Harvard, the Supreme Court reiterated that deviation from the norm of equal treatment on account of race must be temporary. When race is the predominant factor above other traditional redistricting considerations, including compactness, contiguity, and respect for political subdivision lines, the state of Texas must demonstrate a compelling state interest to survive strict scrutiny. It is well established that so-called coalition districts run afoul of the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment. Not true, right? Not true. Not true. Not by themselves. In Pettyway versus Galvin, the in-bank Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals made it abundantly clear that coalition districts are not protected by the Voting Rights Act. This is more accurate. This was a reversal of its previous decision in Campos. In Pettyway, the Fifth Circuit aligned itself with the Supreme Court's decision in Bartlett versus Strickland and determined that a minority group must be geographically compact enough to constitute more than 50% of the voting population in a single-member district. Recall, right? Like, one of these districts is that. Opportunity and coalition districts are premised on either the combining of 2 minority groups or a minority group with white crossover. Neither meets the first jingle's precondition. Thus, the racial gerrymandering of congressional districts is unconstitutional and must be rectified immediately by state legislatures. Right? But for racial gerrymander, you need intent. That's what's key here. A racial gerrymandering is intentional situation. And you don't have evidence that there's intentional racial discrimination in the constructions of these districts. It is the position of the department that several Texas congressional districts constitute unconstitutional racial gerrymanders under the logic and reasoning of Pettyway. Specifically, the record indicates that Texas 9-18 sort Houston voters along strict racial lines to create 2 coalition seats while creating Texas 29 a majority Hispanic district. Okay? Texas 33 is another racially based coalition district that resulted from a federal court order years ago, yet the Texas legislature drew Texas 33 on the same lines of that redistricting. Therefore, it remains a coalition district. Although the state's interest when configuring these districts was to comply with the Fifth Circuit precedent prior to Pettyway, that is not what Texas says, right? That interest no longer exists. Post Pettyway, the congressional districts at issue are nothing more than vestiges of an unconstitutional racially based gerrymandering past, which must be abandoned and must now be corrected by Texas. Please respond to this letter by blah, 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 blah. And if you don't, we reserve the right to go against you and fucking sue you. This is one of my favorite lines. It's challenging to unpack the DOJ letter because it contains so many factual, legal, and typographical errors. Indeed, even attorneys employed by the Texas Attorney General, who profess to be a political ally of the Trump administration, describe the DOJ letter as legally unsound, baseless, erroneous, ham-fisted, and a mess. The gist of the letter, though, is that the DOJ is urging Texas to change the racial compositions of these 4 districts from the premise that Pettyway forbids a plaintiff from proposing a coalition district for purposes of an effect-based vote dilution claim under the VRA Section 2. DOJ leaps to the conclusion that whenever a legislature enacts a map that happens to contain 1 or more coalition districts, that it is engaged in racial gerrymandering, right? Different legal concepts, right? So it's diluted on multiple levels. One is the notion that unintentional coalition districts are necessarily racial gerrymanders, and that the holding of Pettyway with respect to vote dilution under Section 2 applies to racial gerrymandering. The remedy for such racial gerrymandering, according to DOJ, is to change the offending district's racial makeup, right? That is just true. How do you fix the coalition districts? You change the racial makeup of the district. That reading of Pettyway is clearly wrong. Nowhere in Pettyway does the Fifth Circuit hold that merely having a coalition district is per se unconstitutional. The Pettyway court had no occasion to opine about the constitutionality of coalition districts. Instead, the en-banc court remanded the case to the district court to consider the plaintiff's constitutional claims in the first instance. Nor could Pettyway stand for such a proposition. That would contradict the Supreme Court's admonition that the Constitution does not place an affirmative obligation upon the legislature to avoid creating districts that turn out to be heavily minority. So there's no affirmative obligation to avoid a heavy minority district. And often that was done to the benefit of conservatives and Republicans. Rather, the Constitution simply imposed an obligation not to create such districts for predominantly racial as opposed to political or traditional districting motivations, right? So let's say that you have an 80% black district. What the court is saying is creating that district isn't by itself, it's the Supreme Court, right? Unlawful, unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. If you were to make that district based on traditional districting principles like compactness and like town lines, municipal stuff, then, and it just happens to create a district that is heavily black, that's not the unconstitutional gerrymander. What's an unconstitutional racial gerrymander is when you intend to do it, when it's a predominating reason. So ironically, in trying to ostensibly, right, on the face of it, prevent a racial gerrymander, at least in their facial reason, the Trump administration was asking Texas to do a racial gerrymander. Thus, even though federal courts in this circuit can no longer force a legislative body, we can't force you to create a coalition district. That doesn't prohibit such a body, that is the legislature, from voluntarily creating a coalition district for political or other race-neutral reasons. The Supreme Court's plurality opinion in Bartlett versus Strickland further reinforces this point. Even if Section 2 doesn't require a legislature to create a particular type of district, Section 2 in the Constitution don't prohibit the legislature from drawing that type of district, nor is it lawful for a legislature to purposely target such districts for destruction. Bartlett involved a slightly different type of district, a crossover district, in which the minority populations make up less than a majority of the voting age population, but it is large enough to elect the candidate of its choice with help from voters who are members of the majority and who cross over. So there's a different kind of a district that they were like, should we have to create or adhere to under Section 2 these crossover districts where you're almost at a majority and you just need a little help to get there. Much like Pettyway would subsequently hold with respect to coalition districts, Bartlett from the Supreme Court held that a plaintiff may not satisfy the Jingles preconditions by proposing a crossover district. Thus, legislatures need not create crossover districts to avoid violating Section 2. Critically, however, the Bartlett Court emphasized that its holding that Section 2 does not require crossover districts did not address the permissibility of such districts as a matter of legislative choice or discretion. The Supreme Court cautioned that Bartlett should not be interpreted to entrench majority-minority districts by statutory command, for that too could pose constitutional concerns. States that wish to draw crossover districts are free to do so where no other prohibition against such district exists, but the Bartlett Court also admonished that if a state intentionally drew district lines in order to destroy otherwise effective crossover districts, that would raise serious concerns under both the 14th and 15th Amendment. So, in other words, if you are specifically trying to destroy crossover districts because of race reasons, that would raise these concerns. Just like if you are intentionally trying to destroy coalition districts, that would raise serious concerns. So it's precisely like the opposite of what Trump is saying. 15 years after Bartlett, Pettyway determined the same legal conclusions apply to crossover as to coalition. To underscore the point, the circuit took the Bartlett opinion and replaced each instance of crossover with coalition. Pronounced the opinion's logic remained sound. Performing Pettyway's word replacement exercise with the above quoted passages, Bartlett yields the following propositions. Pettyway's holding that Section 2 does not require coalition districts has no bearing on the permissibility of such districts as a matter of legislative choice or discretion. States that wish to draw coalition districts are free to do so where no other prohibition exists. And if there were showing that a state intentionally drew district lines in order to destroy otherwise effective coalition districts, that would raise serious questions. Those propositions directly contradict the DOJ's letter's assertion that coalition districts are per se unconstitutional, as well as its argument that Texas can and must rectify the 2021 map. Besides those legal errors, the DOJ letter also contains factual inaccuracies. Most egregiously, the letter lumps Congressional District 29 with 9, 18, and 33 as examples of coalition districts. As DOJ realizes halfway through the letter, however, Congressional District 29 was not a coalition district under the 2021 map. It was a majority Hispanic district. Nothing in Pettyway has any bearing on single race majority districts, so Pettyway doesn't have any legal basis to attack this racial composition. All that said, DOJ might have had a decent argument if there were evidence that the legislature intentionally drew the 2021 map to include coalition districts the legislature wouldn't have otherwise drawn. As noted above, however, the preliminary injunction record revealed no such thing. Nothing in the record indicates they drew this with an eye towards creating those districts. We thus presume that any coalition districts that ended up were coincidental byproducts applying race-neutral criteria. There's consequently no indication the legislature would have drawn its maps differently if Pettyway had been the governing law in 2021. So there's nothing in the record to suggest that this is these coalition districts emerged because we were trying to preempt a Section 2 claim. If there was, maybe we could say, all right, this is trying to rectify some change in the law or something. It's not itself a racial gerrymander. Legally and factually, DOJ has no valid argument the legislature should restore the House map to some pre-existing racial equilibrium. Far from seeking to rectify racial gerrymandering, the DOJ urges Texas to inject racial considerations into what Texas insists was a race-neutral, a race-blind process. But what about DOJ's assertion that the District 33 is a racially based coalition district that resulted from a federal court order? If a court forced Texas to draw 33 as a coalition district based on compos, can't the legislature redraw that district now that VRA Section 2 no longer requires it? The short answer is that this is another one of the letter's many inaccuracies. It's true that Congressional District 33 traces its lineage to a court-ordered map that a different three-judge panel of this court imposed in 2012 when the state couldn't get its own map pre-cleared under VRA Section 5. It's also true that the three-judge panel based Congressional District 33's boundaries partly on racial considerations. The challengers in the VRA Section 5 pre-clearance proceedings, by the way, this has been found unconstitutional under this case called Shelby Holder, Shelby County, v. Holder. I think that's right, Shelby County v. Holder. Pre-clearance proceedings had raised potentially viable claims that the legislature had intentionally discriminated when drawing Congressional District 33, and the panel configured Congressional District 33 to address that concern. But it's not true that they drew that district as a racially based coalition district, based on the now overruled interpretation of Section 2. Because the panel was unable to conclude that the plaintiffs were likely to succeed on their Section 2 claims premised on coalition districts, the panel said it would have been inappropriate to intentionally create a coalition district on the basis of race or otherwise intentionally unite populations based on race. Thus, in its order imposing the court-drawn map, the panel emphasized that its configuration of 33 was not a minority coalition district and was not drawn with that intention. In a subsequent order issued 5 years later, the panel again reiterated that Congressional District 33 was not intentionally drawn as a minority coalition district. Rather, it was created to remedy the alleged intentional discrimination raised in the VRA Section 5 preclearance proceeding. So this order has nothing to do with the Section 2 coalition district, and that it was done to remedy an intentional discrimination. While it might be accurate to say that Congressional District 33 ultimately became a coalition district based on its electoral performance and racial composition, DOJ's implication that the legislature purposely drew the 33rd district as a racial-based coalition district based on pre-Pettyway law is demonstrably false. Because the prior three-judge panel didn't force Texas to draw Congressional District 33 as a coalition district under VRA Section 2, nothing about Pettyway's subsequent reinterpretation of Section 2 casts any doubt on its legality. Even if the three-judge panel had drawn it as a coalition district based on Section 2, the lines changed when the legislature redistricted in 2021, as the blue arrows show. So the district not only wasn't drawn for the reasons that Trump says, but they actually changed the line, so it became a different district. To the extent that the DOJ letter accuses the legislature of drawing Texas on the same lines, that is factually inaccurate. The DOJ letter is equally notable for what it doesn't include any mention of partisanship. Had the Trump administration sent Texas a letter urging the state to redraw its congressional map to improve the performance of the Republican candidates, that's crazy, by the way, that we would have that, right? Like the DOJ would be involved in trying to improve the performance of Republicans. The plaintiff groups would face a much greater burden to show that race, rather than partisanship, was the driving force behind the map, but nothing in the letter is couched in terms of partisan politics. The letter commands Texas to change 4 districts for one reason and one reason only: the racial demographics of the people who live there. And now the last thing I'll end on is what Abbott said after the letter, which is just, it's so delicious. Abbott issued a proclamation adding the redistrict to the agenda, saying the following: legislation that provides a revised congressional redistricting plan in light of constitutional concerns raised by the DOJ. The governor shared, at a minimum, that he wanted the legislature to take action to address DOJ's concerns that the maps were racial makeup maps. The governor's proclamation contains no requests that it be done for partisan purposes. Right now, you start to see the PR strat interfering with the legal strat. So by saying this isn't, they're trying to get people to say California started it, we're not doing any partisan gerrymandering. By not saying that, and by instead saying, hey, this is just to rectify something that we have to rectify. And by not claiming partisan gerrymandering, which was probably what they were actually motivated, almost certainly, right? And by claiming instead that this is to affect the racial composition, they've caused themselves problems. Here, too, the governor had explicitly directed them they would face a higher burden. Instead, by incorporating the DOJ's race-based redistricting by reference, the governor was asking the legislature to give DOJ the racial rebalancing it wanted, and for the reasons that the DOJ cited. Contemporaneous media interviews reinforced that he was asking for a racial gerrymander. When asked about an August 11, 2025 press interview, whether his decision to add redistricting to the legislative agenda was motivated by Trump's demand for additional seats, the governor demurred and insisted the real impetus for redistricting was Pettyway. Jake Tapper. The Texas Tribune reports that in June you told Texas Republican that you were reluctant to add redistricting to the legislative agenda. The Tribune says that President Trump then called you to discuss redistricting, and you agreed to put it on the special session agenda. Would you have gone forward with redistricting if President Trump had not personally got involved and asked you to do this? Governor Abbott. To be clear, Jake, this is something that I have been interested in for a long time. First of all, I have been involved in redistricting litigation for more than 20 years. Second, one thing that spurred all this is a federal court decision that came out last year, a case that was filed by Democrats. The federal court decision that came out last year said that Texas is no longer required to have coalition districts. And as a result, we had drawn maps with coalition districts. Now, we wanted to remove these coalition districts and draw them in a way, in fact, turned out to provide more seats for Hispanics. it just coincides it's going to be Hispanic Republicans. So he's saying it's just a coincidence that it's partisan. The real reason is because of race. Again, to be clear, the reason we are doing this is because of the court decision. So they're completely buying and saying the purpose of this is race. This would be like him saying, we are doing this redistrict because we don't like the racial makeup of this district. And so we want to affect the racial makeup to change it. When given an opportunity to publicly proclaim that the motivation for adding redistricting to the legislative agenda was solely to improve Republicans' electoral prospects at President Trump's request, the governor denied it. Instead, the governor expressly stated his predominant motivation was racial. He wanted to remove coalition districts and provide more seats for Hispanics. The fact that the racially reconfigured districts would happen to favor Republicans was, to paraphrase the governor's own words, just a fortuitous coincidence. You can't get more delicious than this, folks, right? If you stuck around for this part, it's so fucking delicious. Because these motherfuckers can't help but lie constantly. And the one time when it would have been beneficial for them to just come out and say, you know what? Yeah, we want to do what's allowed. We want to do some partisan gerrymandering. They have to lie and say, oh, we just want to really help Hispanics. We want to improve Hispanics. We want to affect racial compositions. In other press statements around the same time, the governor similarly stated his motivation was to eliminate coalition districts, not for political reasons. The governor consistently used language suggesting that he viewed the map's improved Republican performance not as an end in and of itself, but as a coincidental byproduct. And the AG responded to the DOJ letter too. At the same time, the governor was announcing the 2025 racial objectives. The AG was saying the opposite. Just 2 days after the governor added redistricting to the legislative agenda based on DOJ's constitutional concerns, the AG sent DOJ a response. That response said essentially the same thing we say, that the change in the law affected by Pettyway cast no doubt on the legality of the map. Although the Attorney General doesn't say so explicitly, the purpose behind his letter appears to have been to refocus the redistricting dialogue towards permissible considerations like partisanship, politics, and traditional districting criteria, and away from the legally fraught considerations like race. So Abbott's like, what are you doing, Trump? Trump, what are you doing? We don't have to do this. What are you talking about, Trump? And fucking Abbott's such a fucking idiot. And that explains also, because I didn't really think about this much when this happened other than the political ramifications. But I was like, why is Abbott like coming out against this letter? And I'm like, oh, that's why. He's like, oh no, he's trying to like wink, don't say that, don't admit it alone. If that was the letter's purpose, it didn't work. The governor continued to declare publicly that Pettyway was the impetus for the redistricting, and Texas's reason for redistricting was to change the racial characteristics, and the legislature proceeded to do just that. The 2025 map did all but one of the things the DOJ and the governor expressly said they wanted to do. Anyway, we're not going to keep going through all this stuff and this analysis. It's too much, but just take a moment. And who knows if this is going to stick around, all right? Who the hell knows if this is going to be the way it is, and if the Supreme Court's not going to be like, actually, it's not racial-based gerrymandering if you're trying to interpret a law incorrectly or something. Or maybe, maybe coalition districts are illegal, even though it contradicts our own precedent. Who the fuck knows? But just take a moment right now to soak in the pickle they created for themselves and the potential, the delicious potential. What if this map, which was clearly based on racial composition, obviously so, admittedly so, what if it's struck down under traditional intentional racial gerrymandering rationale? And what if California's sticks around? Then the Democrats are going to be ahead on gerrymandering. And this is why I think it's a realistic possibility. Always price in probably 40% that the Supreme Court's going to fuck the country over. So you always have to price that in. Can't be too confident, can't be too cocky, because this court loves to ignore shit like the rule of law. But this isn't a Section 2 case. So even if, which I'm going to say probably will happen, the Supreme Court undoes the VRA Section 2 altogether, which will definitely hurt Democrats disproportionately. It doesn't really have a bearing on this. Or at least I don't see one way in which it could. Because the basis of the court's decision here, at its fundamental level, is an unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. An intentional racial gerrymander. Not a Section 2 effects-based gerrymander. An intentional racial gerrymander. And so, this could blow up in Texas's face. That said, let us never forget. Let us never forget. SCOTUS are skilled at giving Trump whatever he wants. They even created a new doctrine just to do that. Absolutely true. So, bask in it a little bit in the stress of Republicans. Bask in the epic and easily avoidable issue that they've created for themselves. In the quickly approaching deadlines that they have to face. In the stress that they have to manage now. With all of the Epstein disclosure stuff happening at the same time. Love to see that. Bask in that. Just for a few days. Any final questions? Seeing none. I want you to like the stream, all right? We're going to do great things together. I like you to sub. Sub to the stream. Do what you can. Be good. You learned a lot. You learned a lot. If you watched the stream, you learned a lot. If you listened, you learned. Live and learn on Thursday, I believe. Hopefully, I'll be able to make it. And stay cool, folks. Shit's coming down the pipeline. You got to stay frosty.